A billionaire CEO actually took a liking to a poor guy like me. He even offered $5 million just to forcefully keep me by her side. She even said that as long as I agree to her conditions, I could avoid struggling for a lifetime. All because I was reborn into a world with more women than men. Here, if a woman wants to marry a man, she not only has to give a $3 million dowry but also ensure he has a car and a house. Moreover, the news often reports cases of men being violated. So, in the 20 years since coming to this world, this handsome man, dare not go out alone, for fear of being forcibly taken away by female thugs as soon as I step out. The fact that men in this world can get pregnant and give birth has cast a shadow over my thoughts of marriage, but often what we fear most comes to pass. After I graduated, my mom has been keeping me at home. She even often practices singing, dancing, and rapping, which are typically things girls do. In the end, my mom kicked me out in a fit of anger, and demanded that I find a wife within a year. Today, the woman my mom arranged for me is already the 108th blind date. In order to deal with the blind date arranged by my mom, I can only go out wearing a mask. Arriving at the Ikuan bar, after looking around, I found that most of the people at the bar were just some young ladies having fun. After searching around, I didn't see my blind date. In the end, it was with the guidance of the bar waitress that I arrived at a private room. Now I'm in a panic. Why does a blind date need a private room? She's so beautiful. If the blind date has ill intentions and tries to force himself on me in the private room, I won't even have a chance to escape. But thinking about my mom pressuring me to get married, I had to steel myself and walk into the private room. As soon as I walked in, I saw an extremely beautiful and aloof woman, leaning back in her chair, fast asleep. I tiptoed up to her, thinking of a way to make her impression of me plummet. If I rudely woke her up, she would definitely get angry, and then I could find an excuse to slip away. Then if my mom asked, I could shift the blame and say this woman had a bad temper and I couldn't stand it. Thinking this, I gently tapped the beautiful woman's shoulder, but she didn't react at all. Looking at her cold and beautiful face, I couldn't help but sigh at how stunning she looked. I pushed her again, but as soon as I touched her shoulder, she pinned me to the table. How did you get in here? A woman's cold voice rang out. I'm here for a blind date with you. Let go of me first. You hurt me. I shouted in pain. Nan Gongyun looked at my pained expression. It didn't seem fake. She reached out and pulled off my mask and sunglasses. Upon seeing my face, even though she was used to big scenes, she couldn't help but be stunned. You came for a blind date? Nan Gongyun looked at me coldly and asked. As soon as I got up, I started grumbling quietly. I was set up on a blind date and then woken up from my sleep. And you even laid hands on a weak man like me. Immediately, I sat across from Nan Gongyun, with my legs crossed and my arms folded, trying to look like a spirited young man. Yes, I'm here for a blind date with you. Nan Gongyun looked at me, an unbelievably handsome man, and suddenly became interested. But when she saw me shaking my leg while talking, she frowned disapprovingly. Haven't you ever seen a beautiful woman before? I looked at her displeased expression, feeling ecstatic inside. This was exactly the effect I wanted. As long as she's not satisfied, this blind date is basically over. This move of mine never fails. But if I encounter the type that insists on marrying me just because I'm good looking, then I'll have to activate Plan B. Oh, I've been used to it since I was young. The elders at home couldn't control me. Miss Liu, you wouldn't want to use the same method as the elders to educate me, would you? I said indifferently. Miss Liu, Nan Gongyun was taken aback for a moment, but she quickly figured everything out. You came out on a blind date without even knowing the name of your blind date. Then why did you come for a blind date? The way you're talking now, you're asking for trouble. But seeing her frosty face, I immediately backed down. My name is Yi Ming. The expression on this woman's face is so scary now. She looks like she's going to eat a child. Clearly a violent woman. Definitely can't marry her. So I timidly asked, do you have a car and a house? Nan Gongyun coldly spat out this word. She could tell at a glance that I was pretending. After all, which delinquent teenager dresses so conservatively? I was somewhat surprised to hear her answer. How could a sea turtle have a car and a house in Kyoto? The house must still be on mortgage, right? Rest assured, it's fully paid. Nan Gongyun's voice remained calm. The sea turtle with a house and a car left me speechless, but I still planned to argue with her. So I plucked up the courage to ask, what kind of car do you have? She didn't say anything, just casually tossed the car keys on the table. Car keys exclusive to a Rolls-Royce, nearly blinded my eyes. This is definitely a rich and beautiful woman. Nan Gongyun looked at my dumbfounded expression and suddenly found me quite cute. Then she joked, Mr. Yi, are you satisfied? Hearing this, I reacted and realized that now I could only start the second plan. Thinking this, I put on an innocent look. I am very satisfied with your conditions. So, if we get married, will you add my name to the house and the car? Will you give me money? It's all up to you, she replied in a calm tone, as if it were a very ordinary matter. I find your answer somewhat unbelievable. What did you say? I didn't hear it wrong, did I? I've acted so arrogantly, any normal person would have gone crazy with anger. Those with a bad temper might even make me leave. But what's the deal with this cold and elegant lady? Does she even belong to the category of normal people? Marry me and I guarantee you a worry-free life for the rest of your days. But you have to agree to one condition. What condition? I asked in confusion. Your appearance would attract too much attention. I don't want you exposed to the public eye. You'll just have to stay at home honestly, be a homebody. You must have my permission for going out, Nangongyan said slowly. Although this condition sounds simple, there are few who can actually do it. The moment I heard it, I wanted to get married even less. At this point, I pretended to be in a difficult situation. Miss Liu, your demands are too high for me. I've been used to freedom since I was young, so we're not suitable. I pretended to be regretful, my acting skills were top-notch. But in Nangongyan's eyes, this was no different from lying to a child. She crossed her arms, displaying a haughty attitude in front of me. People who are not used to it always need an adaptation process. I believe Mr. Yi will gradually adapt. Now I was really flustered, my refusal was so obvious. This woman actually wants to persist. Just as I was about to refuse again, a knocking sound came. Come in, as the voice of Nangongyan fell. A waiter walked in. What is it? Nangongyan's cold voice rang out. She said to me apologetically, I'm sorry, sir. Your friend has changed the private room and is waiting for you in room 168. After hearing what the waiter said, my handsome face turned red in an instant. After pretending in front of this woman for so long, it turns out she's not the blind date. Seeing Nangongyan's interested gaze, I felt so embarrassed that I wished I could dig a hole and hide, so I quickly got up. I apologized, I'm sorry. It was presumptuous of me and wasted your precious private time. Please don't take to heart what I said earlier. Saying that, I quickly escaped from the private room. Today is so embarrassing. This woman, she clearly knew it was a case of mistaken identity but didn't say anything. Thinking about what I said earlier, I wish I could find a hole to hide in right now. As Nangongyan watched me escape, a meaningful smile played at the corner of her mouth. Shortly after, I arrived at private room 108. The door was opened by a tall woman who, although angry for waiting for so long, but the moment she saw me, she was completely stunned. Oh my, this handsome man is actually my blind date. She felt that the man in front of her was more handsome than any man she had ever seen. I looked at this average-looking girl and couldn't help but ask, excuse me, are you Miss Liu Ruyan? To prevent making another mistake, I decided to just ask her name directly. Yes, you must be Mr. Yi Ming. You are even more beautiful in person than in the photos. She smiled and invited me in, while planning to get me drunk later. However, I saw through her little scheme. As soon as I sat down, I hit her with a series of soul-searching questions. Do you have a car, a house, and savings? I used this combination skill. This self-proclaimed high-quality female returnee was blushing uncontrollably. I can work hard. Now Liu Ruyan was really anxious. She couldn't let this handsome man slip away, so she quickly painted a rosy picture for me. Hearing this, I coldly smiled at Mess. Liu, our time as men is very precious. Beauty only lasts for a dozen or so years. Why should I wait for you? These two sentences immediately silenced her, but she was unwilling to accept it. A good-looking man like me, once missed, is gone forever. I looked at her hesitant look and stood up to leave. But Liu Ruyan became anxious and hurried to the door to stop me. Yi Ming, can you please not go? I fell in love with you at first sight. Give me a chance, and I will make you happy for sure. This method of hers never fails. As long as she pitifully begs these men, they all soften and agree. It was with this move that she won over her 18th boyfriend. But I am different from those men. Despite her pleas, I still insisted on leaving. When Liu Ruyan saw the duck flying towards her mouth, an evil thought arose in her heart. She immediately put on a different expression. Coldly threatening, she said, I advise you to obediently submit to me. If I'm in a good mood, maybe I'll be a little gentler with you. Otherwise, I might hurt you later. Don't blame me for not warning you. Seeing her looking like she wanted to devour someone, I instinctively took a step back. After all, in this world, men's strength is no match for women's. I looked at her in terror and said, don't come any closer. This is illegal. Liu Ruyan licked her lips, treating me as if I were a delicacy. If I could taste a handsome man like you, it would be worth it for 10 years. 5 years would be a huge profit. My heart skipped a beat. This woman must be crazy. She wanted to kiss the handsome man in front of her, but Yiming quickly pushed her head away and shouted loudly towards the door, "Help!" The isolation effect of the private room is very good. Even if you put your ear to the door, you can't hear the sound inside, so no matter how loud Yiming shouts, it's useless. Lu Ruyan grabbed his hands with one hand and then struck his abdomen with the other hand. Ugh! With this blow, Yiming, who was still struggling and shouting, instantly groaned, clutching his stomach and curling up. "You stubborn Korean, you're forcing me, aren't you?" Lu Ruyan looked at his painful appearance, showing no mercy and trying to tear off his clothes. Yiming saw the situation, put his hands on her shoulders, then propped up with one foot, and pushed her off himself. Then he endured the pain and got up, running towards the door. Lu Ruyan, who had reacted, immediately grabbed his ankle and pulled him down to the ground. Yiming was in so much pain that he saw stars. Zhou Shualan once again straddled him and said fiercely, "You Korean stick is quite tough. I'll make you beg me to stop later." With that, she pulled open his t-shirt. "Lu Ruyan, you deserve to die. Let go of me." Yiming held her hand and continued to insult her. "Korean stick." Lu Ruyan couldn't stand it anymore and punched him, leaving him speechless. She paid no attention to Yiming's suffering and tried to take off his pants, but at that moment, the door of the room was opened with a drip. As soon as the door opened, a group of tall bodyguards in black suits and sunglasses walked in. Lu Ruyan was startled by the sudden appearance of these people, and when she came to her senses, she asked coldly, "Who are you?" They didn't speak, but stood on both sides of the two, and several bodyguards stood in 2 rows at the door. Nangong Yun, dressed in an expensive black suit, walked in slowly from the door. As soon as she entered, she saw Yiming, who was in pain on the ground, and Lu Ruyan on top of him, looking at her in confusion. She took another look at the messy scene in the room and immediately understood what had happened. Lu Qingqing, who was behind her as her longtime assistant, knew that Nangong was not feeling well. She signaled to a bodyguard, who understood and came to Lu Ruyan. "You, what do you want to do?" Before she could finish speaking, the bodyguard punched her in the face. The punch was simple and direct. After being hit, Lu Ruyan flew back a meter and fell to the ground, motionless. Another bodyguard picked her up as if she were trash, and Lu Qingqing said to her, "Take her to the police station." "Yes." The tall female bodyguard responded and carried Lu Ruyan out. Nangong Yun looked at Yiming on the ground, came to him, and picked him up. As she held him, Lu Qingqing looked at Nangong Yun in disbelief. She, who had always been averse to men, never expected to touch a man voluntarily. Since she had been working for Nangong, she had never seen her have any contact with any man. But today, not only did she touch him, she also picked him up voluntarily. This shocked Lu Qingqing, but she didn't show it. Nangong Yun carried Yiming back to the matchmaking room, gently placed him on the red leather sofa, and then sat down at the table, staring at his beautiful face. Yiming, who was on the sofa, was in so much pain that he had almost passed out after being punched twice. After all, men in this world are naturally weak, and Lu Ruyan, who is 1.8 meters tall, might not be beaten by 5 Yimings. Fortunately, his physical condition was better than that of an average man, and he quickly recovered from the minor injuries. He rubbed his abdomen and stood up. He looked at Nangong Yun, blushing, and said, "Thank you for saving me. If there's nothing else, I'll leave." After saying that, he wanted to leave, feeling embarrassed for mistaking the blind date and being saved by her. "Stop." Nangong Yun saw this and quickly stopped him. "Ha?" Yiming stopped and turned to look at her, then awkwardly touched his nose. "Is there anything else? What do you think?" Nangong Yun asked in return. Yiming scratched his head in confusion, looking at his adorable appearance. Nangong Yun's lips slowly curved up. "Our blind date isn't over yet, you can't leave." "Ha?" Yiming was a little confused. "But you're not my blind date, are you?" "What? Don't want to?" Looking at his bitter face, Nangong Yun narrowed her beautiful eyes. "No, can I refuse?" "Oh, I'm afraid you don't have the right to decide," Nangong Yun said lightly, but her tone carried an irresistible dominance. "And I just saved you. Do you want to leave after just saying thank you?" Her tone was cold. "Then what do you want me to do?" Yiming asked helplessly. "Come over here first," Nangong Yun said lightly. Hearing this, Yiming hesitated and looked at her, but under Nangong Yun's sharp gaze, he slowly moved to the side of the mahogany table. Watching his hesitant movements, Nangong Yun raised her eyebrows slightly. "What? Are you still shy? Where did that rascal attitude go?" Listening to her teasing, Yiming's face became awkward, and he lowered his head. "I really appreciate what you did just now. Since you want to thank me, then sit over here obediently," Nangong Yun said, and Yiming immediately moved to her side, but only his buttocks touched the corner of the chair. "Are you afraid of me? I won't eat you," Nangong Yun asked coldly. Yiming remained silent. After this incident, he had already made a decision in his heart that he would never go on a blind date again. Seeing him silent, Nangongyun continued, "It should be your mother who forced you to come here, right?" "Yes," he nodded lightly and then looked at her. "How did you open the door just now?" he asked in confusion. After all, the soundproofing of the private room was very good, and no one would hear even if you shouted at the top of your lungs. But she opened the door in that situation and saved him. There was a person who left in the middle of the blind date, so Nangongyun looked at him lightly. "I came to find him and continue the blind date." Hearing this, Yiming, who was already embarrassed, blushed even more. He felt embarrassed and scratched his head, then explained, "Actually, I didn't want to go on a blind date. It was my mom who forced me to come. I came, and who knew I would encounter this kind of thing? I'm really sorry." As he spoke, Yiming's voice became weaker and weaker. If anyone else had encountered this kind of thing, they would probably be embarrassed for the rest of their lives. "You don't need to apologize to me. Now, let's continue our blind date," Nangongyun said calmly. "Continue?" Yiming made a bitter face and said unwillingly, "This won't work. It was a misunderstanding, and we're not familiar with each other." He. Nangongyun sneered, "Not familiar? Are you sure?" "Ha?" Yiming was a little silly and stood still. He asked in a daze, "Could it be we are familiar?" Looking at his silly appearance, her cold expression softened, and her beautiful face blossomed with a smile, brightening up the whole room for a moment. "Have you ever been familiar with someone on a blind date?" Nangongyun wanted to tease him a little. There was no way around it. He was so cute and silly now compared to when he first came in. It's not often to see such a beautiful and silly young man, and the most important thing is that she didn't reject him. Instead, she had a strange feeling. It was as if this young man in front of her was her own toy, making her want to possess him. "How old are you?" Nangongyun asked. "I'm 20 this year," he answered honestly. "What's your major? Which university did you graduate from?" "Finance management, graduated from Huaxia Business College." Nangongyun heard this and her eyes flashed. This guy looked silly, but she didn't expect him to graduate from Huaxia Business College. It seemed like she had found a treasure. Nangongyun looked at Yiming with increasing satisfaction, even liking him more and feeling an impulse to claim him as her own. Perhaps because Nangongyun's gaze was too intense, Yiming couldn't help but shrink his neck and ask, "Why are you looking at me like that?" Seeing Yiming's silly look, Nangongyun suddenly found it amusing. "You're quite interesting, little guy," she said with a smile. Yiming, feeling puzzled, asked, "Sister, I don't even know your name." "You can call me Nangongyun." "Nangongyun?" Yiming murmured the name. "Your surname is quite unique." "Yes," she replied lightly, then continued, "I'm 24 this year, 4 years older than you." "You can call me Sister Xianyun." Yiming nodded and, looking at her beautiful face, curiously asked, "Sister Xianyun, you're so beautiful. Why would your family force you into blind dates?" She smiled and took a sip of red wine. "Aren't you in the same situation?" Yiming fell silent, seemingly understanding. "By the way, what's your family background? What do your parents do?" Nangongyun asked seemingly casually. "My mother runs a small clothing store, and my parents manage it together," Yiming honestly replied. His family background was modest, not from a prominent family, but so what? Nangongyun thought she could still get what she wanted. With this in mind, a faint smile appeared on Nangongyun's lips as she looked at Yiming. A man as handsome as him would surely have many pursuers, yet he was here on a forced blind date, dressed casually. Thinking this, Nangongyun smiled at him and said, "Since both of us are here on forced blind dates, why don't we do this? I need a boyfriend, and you can be mine." "What?" Yiming was startled, almost dropping the cup he had just picked up. "Sister Xianyun, are you joking, right?" He was just here because of family pressure, he didn't expect to find a wife. "I'm not joking, I'm serious." "What? You don't want to?" Nangongyun seemed to be asking, but her tone gradually turned cold. No, that's not what I meant." "Good, since that's not what you meant, let's get registered tonight." "What?" Yiming was bewildered. Wasn't this progressing too quickly? They were going to get registered after just one night? No, Sister Xianyun, let me be honest with you. I don't plan to get married in my lifetime. Yiming hurriedly waved his hand in refusal. "Oh, why not?" Nangongyun raised an eyebrow. "There's no reason. I just don't plan to get married." He couldn't possibly say it was because he was afraid of pain, could he? That would be too embarrassing. "Well, I'm afraid you don't have a say in this." Nangongyun narrowed her eyes, her gaze deep and carrying a hint of danger. "Because of you, my blind date partner left today. Whose fault is that?" I'm sorry, Sister Xianyun." Yiming felt a bit wronged, lowering his head. Seeing his dejected look, she snorted, "Humph. If apologies were useful, why would we need the police?" Hearing this, Yi Ming became anxious. But you didn't tell me at the time. You didn't ask, Nan Gongyun said lightly, giving him a glance. Yi Ming was speechless. She was silent for a while, leaving him speechless. Nan Gongyun looked at his dumbfounded expression and found it adorable. Then, she suddenly thought of something and said coldly, actually, you don't have to reject so quickly. I can give you a second option. What option? Yi Ming was a little slow to catch on. My mother is pressuring me to get married, so we can get a marriage certificate first, then divorce after 3 years. During this time, I will give you a monthly allowance of 100,000. 100,000 per month. Hearing the offer, Yi Ming was shocked. 10,000 a month would be enough for him to spend for several years. Their family's monthly net profit was not even 100,000. This was too tempting, but he hesitated. He didn't believe that someone who offered 100,000 a month just to get a marriage certificate to appease her mother would not have other demands. Thinking this, he looked at her and tentatively asked, so, do I need to do anything for you? Hearing this, Nan Gongyun smiled and said, during this time, you should stay at home as much as possible, move in with me, and not have any conversations with other women. Otherwise, you will regret it. Upon hearing this, Yi Ming immediately refused. No, these conditions are too strict. My requirements are already quite lenient. Nan Gongyun glanced at him coldly, and I'm not negotiating with you. With a confident and domineering attitude, she seemed to have the upper hand, as if Yi Ming had no choice but to agree. Seeing her strong and domineering posture, Yi Ming was at a loss for what to do. He wanted to refuse, but he had indeed disrupted her original blind date, and he should give her face for saving him just now. But he really didn't want to get married. Seeing this, Nan Gongyun stood up slowly and looked down at him. My patience is limited, and you only have these two options. I'll come to see you tomorrow. I hope you'll be ready. With that, she turned and left, not giving him a chance to refuse. In the room, Yi Ming was left alone, lost in thought. He sighed, feeling helpless. He had thought that going on a blind date would be an easy thing, but it had turned into this situation. But, you'll still come to find me? Can you find me? He said arrogantly as he watched her leave. At night, the bustling streets were brightly lit, and the crowds of people were constantly coming and going. Sitting in a stretched Lincoln sedan, Nan Gongyun looked out the window as the busy street rapidly receded. She recalled the scene from tonight and a faint smile appeared on her cold face. It had been a long time since she had had any contact with a man, and she had a psychological illness that made her very uncomfortable around men. However, tonight's encounter with Yi Ming was an exception. Lu Qingqing sat in front of her, watching her look out the window without disturbing her. It was the first time she had seen Sister Nan have any contact with a man. She had seen a rich young man before, and in an attempt to create a chance encounter, he accidentally fell near her. He thought Nan Gongyun would catch him, but instead, he ended up in close contact with the ground. Although this boy was not as good as the one tonight, he was still considered a player of their generation. However, it seemed that Sister Nan had no interest in him, and even seemed a little disgusted. Nan Gongyun collected her thoughts and turned to look at Lu Qingqing sitting opposite her, and said softly, Qing, give me the personal information about Yi Ming. She thought for a moment, oh, by the way, help me print a marriage contract, remember to leave some loopholes. Lu Qingqing was stunned for a moment, then obediently nodded, yes, Miss Nan. Nan Gongyun leaned back on the sofa with her eyes closed. The extraordinary handsome face from just now kept repeating in her mind, and a faint smile couldn't help but appear at the corner of her mouth. For so many years, no man has ever refused me, and you, Yi Ming, are the first. This man, I've got him. Phew, I'm so tired. Yi Ming returned home. He immediately lay down on the bed, feeling as if he had been emptied. He recalled the events of tonight and felt distressed. This Nan Gongyun, she looks cold and seems like a violent maniac. A woman who would abuse her husband. How did he get involved with such trouble? It's all that damn Lu Ruyan's fault. Yi Ming gritted his teeth and turned over, clutching his abdomen. It hurts so much. There was a faint stabbing pain in his stomach, he frowned, and slowly sat up from the bed. He didn't expect women in this world to be so strong. In his previous life, he could take 5 punches from a man without a problem, but here, he was almost fainting from just 2 punches from a woman. Yi Ming went to the computer desk, turned on the computer, and was about to have a thrilling and endless battle. Even though it was just a chicken pecking at each other, he would be happy for the day. He had completely forgotten about the things Nan Gongyun asked him to prepare. Anyway, he was back home, and he wasn't going out. If you still want to find me, come and get me. After playing 2 rounds, he lost every time. Although he was a novice, he liked to be tough, but every time he abandoned his teammates and started a new round. Wow, are you cheating every time you shake my knife? Yi Ming looked at the computer screen, feeling extremely absurd. As long as he charged up, the person would shake his knife. He cherished his golden armor and golden decree, which he had painstakingly collected, and it wasn't guaranteed to have them in 2 rounds. Damn it! I'm not playing anymore. He quickly retreated, and by his appearance, it was clear that he was a regular at SA. He closed the computer, stretched, and picked up his phone to see a message coming in. He opened it and saw a voice message from his mother. Xiaoming, how was your blind date today? Looking at the message from his mother, he was a little annoyed. What kind of blind date did she arrange? Not only was she an idiot, but she was also very lecherous. Yiming quickly typed on his phone. What else can I say? Your precious son almost got forced by someone. What kind of blind date did you arrange? Looking at the words on his phone, Yiming suddenly felt even more upset. Do women in this world like to use force? Yiming continued to edit. I won't go on blind dates in the future. Your son has been traumatized. As soon as this message was sent, his mother immediately called. Hello? Son, what did you say? Say it again. What happened on your blind date? Yiming took the phone away, knowing that as soon as he answered the call, his mother's loud voice would start. Mom, the turtle you arranged is now in the police station. Yiming then detailed what happened tonight to his mother, of course, with some embellishments. After listening to her son's account, his mother was furious on the phone. Damn Lu Ruyan, Xiaoming, don't worry, Mom will go to the station and beat her to a pulp. No need, no need. Hearing his mother's angry voice on the phone, Yiming quickly tried to dissuade her. He didn't want his dear mother to get into a fight. What if she didn't handle it well and ended up in trouble? What would they eat? Dirt? This world provides convenience for men, but also brings disadvantages. Men hardly get hired by any company, no matter where they go for a job. The reason is that men are picky and often throw punches, which results in men finding jobs with lower salaries than women. Especially good-looking boys, not only are they delicate and weak, but they also can't do heavy work. Therefore, every time Yiming goes to find a job, he will be rejected, and even if he is hired, he will be harassed by his boss. So far, he hasn't found a job, but his appearance has brought some benefits. Whenever Yiming has free time, he will go to his mother's clothing store to work. Just by standing there, he attracts a lot of attention. These people come in to look around, buy something, and when it's time to pay, Yiming smiles, creating a lively scene. His mother on the phone felt sorry. Oh, this time it's Mom's fault. I didn't see the look on Lu Ruyan's face. Son, are you okay? Your son was really punched twice. Do you think that's okay? Yiming complained. Then wait, Mom will come to accompany you right away, and I'll have your dad make some stew for you. Hearing his mother's words, Yiming couldn't help but smile. His parents are very good to him. Oh, no need, Mom. Yiming looked at the time and found that it was already late. He didn't want to be nagged by his mom late at night. It's getting late, I want to rest early. Okay, then I won't bother you. Good night, son. Well, good night. After saying this, Yiming immediately hung up the communicator, lay on the bed, propped his head with both hands, and stared at the ceiling. Suddenly, he thought of what the woman said today and shook his head. Forget it, I don't want to think about it. I'll take a shower and go to bed. After saying that, he lifted the blanket, went into the bathroom, and after washing up, he lay on his familiar big bed. That night, he had a dream. He dreamed of a woman in a black suit whispering in his ear, Xiaoming, you are mine, you can't escape. He wanted to see her face clearly, but no matter how he explored, her face was like a mist. The next morning, Yiming hadn't woken up yet when he heard a knock on the door. Bang, bang, bang. This sound made him feel annoyed. He rubbed his sleepy eyes and impatiently shouted, Who is it? The person outside didn't speak, just kept knocking. Yiming, wearing a nightgown, staggered to the door. Coming, if you knock again, the door will break, he said as he rubbed his eyes and came to the door. Click, the door opened, and he stuck his head out, yawning and looking like he hadn't woken up. Who is it? Why are you knocking so early in the morning? If you want to see me. He had only said half of his sentence when he was speechless. You. He pointed at the woman outside the door, unable to speak a complete sentence. The woman outside was wearing a domineering and noble black suit, with a beautiful and shiny black braid, a cold and beautiful melon-seed face, slender and curved eyebrows, sparkling and agile eyes, and pink lips, like a rose blooming in the cold ice, beautiful and charming yet with a hint of coldness and aloofness. What, don't you recognize me? Nan Gongyan raised her eyebrows, smiling ambiguously. Yiming stared at her dumbfoundedly, and behind her were a large group of bodyguards. He roughly counted at least 15 of them. How did you find this place? Yiming swallowed and had never told her where he lived. Nan Gongyan waved her hand, and all the bodyguards behind her stepped back. Don't ask how I found it. I found it, and now you should get ready to go with me. Go with you? What for? Yi Ming was a little dumbfounded. Why did you come knocking on the door early in the morning and talk nonsense? Have you forgotten our agreement from last night? Nan Gongyun reminded him. Last night? What happened last night? Looking at Yi Ming's bewildered expression, Nan Gongyun couldn't help but sigh. This man is good at everything, except a bit foolish. She approached slowly, her gaze fixed on his chest. You promised last night to go with me to register today. You haven't forgotten, have you? Her tone carried a hint of threat. Register? What registration? Yi Ming was a bit puzzled. Stop pretending to be clueless. Do you want me to hit you? Nan Gongyun raised her fist towards Yi Ming. Realizing his act had been exposed, he awkwardly touched his nose and put on a pitiful look. Sister Xian Yun, what happened last night was really an accident. Let the readers see what it means for a man to act cute and a woman's heart to flutter. The bodyguards behind them suddenly turned red, even though they were wearing black sunglasses. Even Nan Gongyun was almost fooled, but her composure was remarkable. She cursed the fairy in her heart and coldly ordered the bodyguards, wait outside. Without waiting for Yi Ming's reaction, she opened the door and walked in. Yi Ming quickly shouted, Hey, what are you doing? You can't just enter someone's house without permission. Ignoring his protests, Nan Gongyun sat on the sofa and ordered, Qing, close the door. Yes. Lu Qingqing obediently closed the door, leaving Yi Ming bewildered. Who is the owner of this house, you or me? You look so comfortable, while I look like a disheveled cat who just finished eating a chicken leg. Hey, I'm talking to you, can't you hear me? Yi Ming stood in front of her, looking down at her. Nan Gongyun wanted to pinch his cheek, but restrained herself. Sit down, I have something to tell you. Yi Ming sat on the sofa, puzzled, and said, What is it? I'm so tired. He yawned, his eyes almost closed. Nan Gongyun looked at this silly and lazy man and took out a contract, placing it on the table. She said coldly, I brought the contract. Take a look and sign it if you agree. Hearing this, Yi Ming suddenly became alert. He didn't expect her to bring the contract. He picked it up and read it. The terms seemed normal, mainly stating that he would live in her house and receive a monthly allowance of 100,000. But he felt something was off. Each clause was marked with the explanation rights belonging to the first party. Why add this? What else could it do? For example, the first party cannot force the second party to fulfill the rights of a husband. During the contract period, the male party has the right to refuse to fulfill the wife's legal rights. This all seemed to be in his favor. Even if she wrote that all explanation rights belong to the first party, it shouldn't matter. But he glanced at her suspiciously and saw her cold gaze, then looked back at the contract. Would this woman be so kind? She doesn't do anything and just lets me stay at her house, and she'll give me 100,000 in a month? The more he thought about it, the more uneasy he felt, always feeling that things were not so simple. So he decided to probe again. Xian Yun, actually, I like to live freely, and I don't want to get married for the time being. Who cares if you like freedom or not? Hurry up and sign for me, then come home with me. If it weren't for you, I would have taken my other blind date back long ago. Nan Gongyun pretended to glare at him fiercely. Besides, this is not bad for you. I know it's not bad for me, Yi Ming hesitated. Can I come and go freely during this period? It's boring to stay at home all the time. Hearing this, Nan Gongyun was somewhat displeased. This little man actually dared to make conditions with her. Her face became dark, and her beautiful phoenix eyes stared straight at him. Yi Ming was a little unnerved by her gaze. He lowered his head, avoiding her sharp eyes. The two of them remained at a standstill, one sitting stubbornly and rigidly, the other looking like a gang leader sitting on the sofa. After a long time, Yi Ming couldn't stand her aggressive gaze first. He coughed lightly. Xian Yun, don't look at me like that. I'll sign, okay? He compromised. He couldn't stand it anymore. The pressure was so great that he could hardly breathe. And he also carefully examined the contract. Although he couldn't go out often, he could still go out, and he could get a divorce in 3 years. 10,000 a month, 3 years, that's a lot. When he got divorced, and then took the money he had saved, it would be enough for him to live freely for the rest of his life. Thinking of this, Yi Ming had already fantasized about his carefree days in the future. I'll sign. With that, he decisively wrote his name on the contract. Seeing this, Nan Gongyun's mouth slightly curved, revealing a sly smile. She sat on the sofa, raised her slender jade finger and lifted his chin. Good boy. Good my foot. It's written in the contract that you can't force me to do anything. Yi Ming held the contract, with a proud and arrogant look, hands on his hips. What did you just say? Nan Gongyun's face instantly darkened, with a strong sense of danger in her tone. Yi Ming shrank his neck and immediately changed his tone. I just said, the contract has provisions. You can't force me to do anything. In the end, he raised his head again, with a fearless look. This made Nan Gongyun both angry and amused. If you say this person is foolish, then he knows what's written in the contract. If you say he's smart, then he wouldn't look at the pitfalls in the contract, let alone care about the interests. Ah, indeed, good-looking men are all traded for their rare intelligence. Nan Gong-yun sighed, indifferent. Since the contract is signed, I'll take you to meet my parents tonight and get a marriage certificate. Ah, so urgent? Yi Ming looked at her in surprise, thinking it would take several more days. Not so soon. Nan Gong-yun nodded. Yes, I don't have time to play around with you. My mother is urging me. With that, she stood up. Your luggage? Luggage? Yi Ming tilted his head, somewhat dazed. What luggage? Seeing his appearance, Nan Gong-yun couldn't help it and knocked him on the head. Ouch! Yi Ming cried out in pain, holding his head, and looked up with watery eyes. What are you doing? What am I doing? What do you mean, what am I doing? I told you to pack up last night. Where did you go? Nan Gong-yun heard him dare to question her, and she was instantly angry. Seeing his aggrieved expression, Nan Gong-yun didn't feel good either. I'll give you 5 minutes to pack up, otherwise. When it comes to this, she raised her hand and pretended to have a fierce expression. Yi Ming, seeing her like this, was so scared that he quickly stood up from the ground and ran into the bedroom in a flash. Before long, he dragged the suitcase out and said, Xian Yun, I'm done packing. Nan Gong-yun glanced at him and saw that he had indeed packed almost everything, so she nodded in satisfaction. That's almost it, let's go. With that, she took the luggage from Yi Ming's hand and headed downstairs. Xian Yun, wait a minute, Yi Ming suddenly called out to her. What's the matter? Is there something else? Yi Ming scratched his head, looking hesitant. Seeing his appearance, Nan Gong-yun frowned. What's wrong? Yi Ming took a deep breath and gathered his courage. Can we not get married? Yi Ming's eyes dodged hers, unable to look at her. As soon as he spoke, Nan Gong-yun's originally cold and beautiful face turned dark in an instant. If you try to bargain with me again, you'll see how I'll beat you. Yi Ming quickly shut his mouth, not daring to say another word, and silently followed her to the door. Outside, Lu Qingqing watched the two of them come out. She stepped forward to take the suitcase from Nan Gong-yun's hand and then handed it to the bodyguard behind her. Yi Ming looked at her curiously. He had seen this woman before, and she seemed quite familiar with this violent woman. Lu Qingqing looked at him as he sized her up and nodded at him. Hello, I'm Lu Qingqing, Nangong's assistant. Her voice was clear and pleasant, giving people a comfortable feeling as if bathed in a spring breeze. Yi Ming smiled at her as a way of greeting. At this moment, Nan Gong-yun snorted coldly. Let's go, stop dawdling. With that, she pulled him downstairs. Outside the building, a long red flight commercial vehicle was parked outside the gate. The two got in, and Yi Ming sat next to Nan Gong-yun. Looking out the window at the scenery, he couldn't help but marvel at the luxury. It was the first time in his life that he had ridden in such an expensive car. After driving for about half an hour, they finally arrived in the bustling downtown area. It was already past 6 o'clock in the evening, the sun was still high in the sky, and the streets were bustling with traffic. The streetlights illuminated the road brightly. The two arrived at the marriage registration office. As soon as they got out of the car, a young woman approached them. She looked young, wearing a white shirt and a pencil skirt, giving off the air of a manager. The girl walked up to Nan Gong-yun, bowed respectfully, and spoke in a sweet voice, Miss Nan, please come with me to the office. I will handle the relevant procedures for you. Nan Gong-yun responded coldly. Miss Nan, please follow me. The woman gestured, and Nan Gong-yun led Yi Ming inside, while Lu Qingqing and the others stayed outside. Yi Ming felt a little nervous inside. After all, he had lived for so long, and this was his first time getting a marriage certificate, so he couldn't help but feel a bit anxious. Nan Gong-yun seemed quite calm, her face still cold and unchanged. Watching this scene, Yi Ming felt even more nervous. Once inside, Nan Gong-yun sat in a chair, crossed her legs, and folded her arms. The girl had just taken out 2 marriage certificates from the desk. She handed the marriage certificate to Nan Gong-yun and then bowed her head respectfully, saying, Miss Nan, please sign your name here. Hearing this, Nan Gong-yun glanced at the marriage certificate and then signed her name on the paper certificate. After signing, they took a photo together. When all the procedures were completed, Yi Ming held the marriage certificate in a daze. He had really gotten married like this. So this is what getting married is like? Yi Ming muttered quietly. What did you say? Nan Gong-yun turned her head, squinting her phoenix eyes, and a wave of pressure hit Yi Ming. Nothing. I didn't say anything. Yi Ming explained anxiously, not knowing why, but feeling a faint fear towards the woman in front of him. Let's go, I'll take you home, said Nan Gong-yun naturally, reaching out to hold his hand. As soon as she touched him, Yi Ming reflexively pulled away. Seeing this, Nan Gong-yun's expression darkened. She once again tried to reach for his hand, but Yi Ming dodged her once more. This time, Nan Gongyun couldn't bear it any longer. She looked at Yiming and coldly said, "Yiming, I hope you're not playing with fire." Her eyes were filled with a strong warning. Hearing this, Yiming's body stiffened, a chill creeping up from his feet. No, I just don't want to hold hands," he stammered. Seeing Yiming's reaction, Nan Gongyun suddenly smiled. "Don't want to hold hands? Alright, I'll help you." With that, she reached out and pulled Yiming into her embrace. Caught off guard, Yiming fell into Nan Gongyun's arms, feeling the faint fragrance emanating from her and realizing how tall she was compared to him. Nan Gongyun held Yiming tightly, whispering in his ear, "Yiming, remember from now on, if you dare to have unclear relationships with other women besides me." She paused, then continued in a chilling tone, "You're as good as dead." Yiming felt a shiver run through his body, never having heard someone's voice so cold. Before he could react, Nan Gongyun forcefully took his hand, her touch making him wince. Unable to resist, he let her lead him to the car. Lu Qingqing was already waiting inside, and Nan Gongyun directed her, "Ah Qing, drive to Shanhup." Lu Qingqing nodded and started the car, speeding off. Yiming stole a glance at Nan Gongyun, who was reclining in the back seat, and hesitated before deciding to keep quiet. As Nan Gongyun dozed off in the car, she couldn't help but feel a surge of anger at his rejection. Over the years, he was the only man who had repeatedly refused her. How dare he? With that thought, she abruptly opened her eyes and stared at him coldly, not saying a word. Yiming felt a chill run down his spine. This woman's silence was already terrifying, and now she was staring at him like this. It was downright menacing. Xian Yun, why are you looking at me like that?" Yiming stammered, feeling uneasy. "Humph," she sneered coldly, "what's wrong with looking at you? Who said I can't look at you? I didn't say you can't look." Yiming muttered under his breath, silently cursing this violent woman. He even regretted marrying her, because she was too dangerous. If he ever angered her, he might not be able to escape unscathed. With that thought, Yiming suddenly felt that his decision was hasty. He now wanted to call off the marriage, but looking at her expression, "No, I can't. If I say it, she'll definitely beat me and I still won't be able to divorce her," Yiming thought to himself. He was certain she would do that. With that, Yiming's heart sank, feeling a sense of unease and hearing another voice in his head, "You'll never leave me in this lifetime." Half an hour later, the car stopped in front of a European-style building. Yiming looked through the car window, glanced at the surroundings, and couldn't help but exclaim in surprise. This was the most luxurious wealthy area in the Magic City. Every inch of land was valuable, with even a single house worth millions, not to mention that she had bought the entire piece of land. Yiming couldn't help but ask in disbelief, "Are all of these yours?" He knew she was very wealthy, being able to give herself a monthly allowance of 100,000 yuan, so how could she be poor? But he was still somewhat incredulous. After all, he had heard of Shanhuju, and owning land here was already a sign of being a local tyrant. Looking at Yiming's skeptical expression, Nan Gongyun glanced at him indifferently, then stepped out of the car. Yiming followed and got out of the car. When they stood outside the gate, Liu Qingqing had already opened the door for Nan Gongyun. Yiming looked at the villa and was once again speechless with surprise. Even before entering, the building exuded a valuable aura, and it occupied a large area, surrounded by vibrant roses, red like blood, yellow like paint, purple like crystal, and blue like diamonds. "Do you like it?" At this moment, Nan Gongyun suddenly spoke, her voice still cold but not lacking in tenderness. Yiming nodded in a daze. The decoration here was like an ancient palace, but more modern, with vibrant flowers and plants all around, indicating its vitality. "As long as you like it, this will be your living place in the future." Nan Gongyun walked over, took his hand, and said, "I'm the only one living here, along with the housekeeper and some servants. Let's go in first." She led him into the living room, a spacious space that could accommodate around 500 people, extremely luxurious. All the items were neatly arranged in every corner, with priceless antiques placed every few steps. Yiming was curious about Nan Gongyun's identity and how she could possess such wealth. Just as Yiming was lost in thought, a woman in a black tailcoat approached, smiling at Nan Gongyun. "Miss, dinner is ready." Nan Gongyun nodded, "Okay, I know." Then she turned to Yiming and said, "Xiaoming, this is the housekeeper here, named Liu Yufei." She then introduced Yiming to Liu Yufei, "And Liu, this is Yiming, my husband now." "Hello," Yiming politely nodded. Liu Yufei looked at his restrained appearance and lightly laughed, "Just call me Aunt Liu." Aunt Liu, hello." Yiming awkwardly touched the back of his head. Liu Yufei responded with an and then whispered to Yiming, "You are the first man Miss has brought back." Yiming's cheeks flushed slightly, and he awkwardly smiled, not knowing how to respond. Seeing him silent, Liu Yufei continued, "Miss has a bit of a temper, I hope you can bear with her, sir." "Aunt Liu, I'll do my best." "That's good," Liu Yufei smiled. Nang Gongyan frowned as she watched the two whispering, "Aunt Leo, what are you saying?" Liu Yufei quickly smiled and shook her head. It's nothing. After that, she led the two into a separate kitchen. Since Nang Gongyan could remember, Liu Yufei had always been her housekeeper, taking care of her daily life. Although she was only Nang Gongyan's housekeeper in name, in Nang Gongyan's eyes, she was like a motherly figure. So she had great respect for Aunt Leo. Yaming and the others followed Liu Yufei to the dining table, and seeing the exquisite dishes on the table, he couldn't help but swallow his saliva, his stomach growling instantly. Liu Yufei invited them to sit down and then stepped aside. Originally, Nang Gongyan wanted her to dine together, but she was refused. However, she didn't insist, knowing Liu Yufei's character. Nang Gongyan picked up the chopsticks, picked up a piece of meat from the plate and fed it into her mouth, then said coldly, "The sweet and sour spare ribs taste good, you should try it." After that, she picked up a piece and put it in Yiming's bowl. Yiming hesitated for a moment, but still took a bite. The sweet and sour taste melted in his mouth. It was really amazing. Seeing his happy expression, Nang Gongyan's cold face also showed a slight smile. "The steamed crucian carp is also good, try it." Nang Gongyan picked up another piece of fish and put it in his bowl. "Thank you." Yiming thanked her again, then picked up the fish from the bowl and put it in his mouth. Liu Yufei, who was on the side, looked at the interaction between the two of them and showed a relieved expression. For so many years, she had hardly seen her young lady being so gentle, and today, watching this heartwarming scene, Liu Yufei couldn't help but feel relieved. After the two finished their meal, Nang Gongyan took Yiming to the room upstairs, pushed open the door, and the room was decorated in a cool color scheme, simple and neat, with black and white bed sheets and covers. "This is my room. In order to prevent my parents and Aunt Lu from finding out, you will sleep with me from now on." Nang Gongyan closed the door and said in a cold voice, "Sleep with you?" Yiming was surprised. Was this a bit too fast? Nang Gongyan nodded, as if she had already anticipated his reaction, and said coldly, "My mother has been urging me to get married recently, and Aunt Lu is also watching, so you sleeping with me won't arouse suspicion." But, Yiming looked hesitant. "Isn't this developing too quickly? Can't I sleep in another room?" Nang Gongyan raised her eyebrows and said in a cold tone, "No." "Then I'll sleep on the floor." "No." "Then I'll sleep on the sofa." "No." "Have you forgotten the terms of your contract? Party A cannot force Party B to do anything, otherwise the contract will be terminated," Yiming said somewhat discontentedly. Nang Gongyan coldly snorted, staring directly at Yiming with bright eyes. "I said no, so it's no." Yiming pointed at her in frustration but couldn't say anything. I won't serve you anymore." With these words, Yiming turned and walked angrily towards the door. But before he reached the door, he heard Nang Gongyan's cold voice from behind, "If you dare to leave through this door, then be prepared to receive a lawyer's letter and compensate me with several million." Yiming stopped in his tracks, turned to look at her, and said, "I haven't violated the contract, but you are forcing me to do things I don't like." "Is that so?" Nang Gongyan looked at him coldly. "Do you want to take another good look at it?" Yiming's heart skipped a beat. He took out the paper from the suitcase, carefully read it several times, made sure there was no problem, and then put it away, looking puzzled. "There's nothing wrong with it. It says on it that all explanations belong to Party A, which means that I can now revise the contract without any explanation. The revised contract states that Party B must comply with all of Party A's requests, and if not, they will be liable for triple the penalty," Nang Gongyan said indifferently. Yiming widened his eyes. "This is clearly a tyrannical contract. I will sue you in court," he threatened in frustration, but it seemed that there was no free lunch in the world, and there was a pitfall waiting for him. She looked at him coldly. "You can, but I guarantee that you will never win." Nang Gongyan's tone was cold and resolute, word by word. Yiming gritted his teeth, clenched his fists fiercely, and only relaxed after a while. "Fine, we'll do it together, but you are not allowed to touch me." He knew that he had no money or power to fight against her, and she also had the tyrannical contract, so temporary compromise was the only choice. After hearing his words, Nang Gongyan coldly nodded, agreeing. "My mother will come tomorrow, remember to be careful," Nang Gongyan reminded. Yaming looked at her in confusion. "Are you in such a hurry to meet your parents?" Nang Gongyan nodded without directly responding to him. "You should also inform your mother, otherwise she will still arrange blind dates for you." "You can rest assured about that. I already told her when we signed the contract," Yaming said lightly. Nang Gongyan responded, "You should pack your things first. If you have any questions, you can ask Aunt Lu." After speaking, she left. Yaming watched her disappear and then made a fierce gesture, saying viciously, "Why are you being so fierce? If it weren't for me not hitting women, I would have knocked you down already." Just as he finished speaking, Nang Gongyan walked in with a gloomy expression. She had originally wanted to tell him not to wander around aimlessly to avoid getting lost. But as soon as she turned around, she heard him muttering to himself. Yaming was startled by her sudden return and stammered, "Why? Why are you back again?" Nangongyun snorted coldly, "If you dare to badmouth me behind my back again, I will make you cry right now." Yaming swallowed nervously and said, I didn't say anything." "Humph." Nangongyun looked at him coldly, "I hope so. And don't wander around when there's nothing to do. Stay put for me." With that, she left the room. Yaming stood still in a daze for a long time. After confirming that she was gone, he muttered to himself in a low voice, "Being fierce, what's there to be afraid of? I'm not afraid of any of the three of you." Late at night, after Yaming finished washing up and lay on the big bed staring at the ceiling, he couldn't help but sigh at Nangongyun's words from earlier in the day. "Ah, what are you sighing about?" Suddenly, a cold voice came from beside him. "Oh my god." Yaming was startled and jumped up from the bed, looking at Nangongyun standing beside the bed, and said irritably, "You almost scared me to death. You walk without making any sound." Hearing this, Nangongyun's expression instantly darkened. "Say another dirty word to me and see what happens." Yaming pursed his lips and didn't say anything, thinking to himself, yes, you're the most civilized. Someone is setting me up, signing a hegemonic contract." Seeing that he didn't speak, Nangongyun put down the documents in her hand and went to take a shower with her clothes. Yaming lay on the bed, listening to the sound of water coming from the bathroom. He lay on his side, not looking in the direction of the bathroom door, silently repeating to himself, "I am a pure boy, I don't have a peeping habit." After a while, the bathroom door opened, and Nangongyun came out wrapped in a towel. She used a towel to dry her hair, sat in front of the dressing table, plugged in the hairdryer, and slowly blew her hair. Nangongyun was already very beautiful, with a kind of cold and elegant feeling. Now that she had just finished showering, her skin was slightly flushed, flawless and fair, and her long hair was smooth and draped over her shoulders. Yaming raised his head and couldn't help but take another look at her, thinking to himself, "This violent woman is quite good looking. If only she weren't so fierce." Nangongyun seemed to notice Yaming's gaze, suddenly turned her head, and their eyes met. Yaming quickly lowered his head, pretending to look at his phone. Seeing his appearance, Nangongyun's lips curved slightly, and then she continued to blow dry her hair. After a while, she turned off the hairdryer, walked to the bed, lay down, and as soon as she lay down, she smelled the unique fragrance on him, like the scent of shower gel, but 100 times better. Yaming felt a bit awkward. After all, this was the first time he had shared a bed with someone, and it was a woman, which made him feel a bit strange. Suddenly, Nangongyun turned over and looked at him with cold eyes. "What are you sitting there for? Aren't you going to sleep?" Yaming hesitated for a moment, cleared his throat, and said, Sister Xianyun, can I change to another bed? I'm really not used to sharing a bed with someone." "What did you say?" Nangongyun stared at him coldly, his icy gaze seemed to freeze Yiming. Startled, Yiming shrank back and fell silent. Seeing him quiet, Nangongyun said coldly, "If you don't want a beating, then lie down and sleep." Yiming pursed his lips and obediently lay down, thinking to himself, "So fierce, always so fierce, her temper is really foul." Despite his complaints, he lay down obediently. As he lay down, Nangongyun immediately embraced him. She always found his scent comforting. Feeling her suddenly hugging him, Yiming was at a loss. He wanted to struggle, but her cold voice stopped him. "Don't move, if you do, I'll beat you." She didn't understand tenderness, only that using force could subdue others. Listening to her cold voice, Yiming shivered and allowed her to hold him. After a while, Yiming couldn't help but ask, "Can you put your feet down? How am I supposed to sleep like this?" Seeing her body pressed against his, as if using him as a pillow, he felt speechless. "Why so much nonsense?" Nangongyun glared at him. "Are you trying to pick a fight with me? Do you not know how heavy your feet are? You're over 6 feet tall, and you're putting your legs directly on my stomach. How am I supposed to sleep like this?" Nangongyun couldn't be bothered with him. As long as she was comfortable, it was fine. This little man, if she didn't discipline him, he wouldn't behave. Yiming looked helplessly at the ceiling. After a while, unable to bear the awkward position, he whispered, "Xianyun, I really can't sleep. Can we sleep separately so I can be more comfortable?" Nangongyun didn't respond, but her arm didn't release him. Yiming sighed helplessly. What else could he do? After a long time, he couldn't resist his drowsiness and gradually fell asleep. Listening to Yiming's steady breathing, Nangongyun smiled faintly. He was very handsome, much more so than anyone she had ever seen. She reached out and touched his eyebrows, his nose, his lips, and then lingered at his sexy Adam's apple. She leaned in slowly, he was drawing her in, it felt strange. Looking at his lips, as if they had a magical power, she couldn't help but want to kiss them and taste their flavor. Just as she was about to touch his lips, he suddenly scratched himself, startling her awake. It was only then that she realized her actions. Nangong Yun's gaze lingered on his delicate face. Such a tantalizing little demon, she murmured softly. The next morning, sunlight streamed through the curtains, shining on the bed. Yiming frowned, struggling to open his eyes. He felt sore all over, especially in his waist and chest. It was unbearable. He slowly sat up, rubbing his temples. He had hardly slept well last night, waking up several times. Suddenly, the door was pushed open, and Nangong Yun walked in with a bowl of porridge. Looking at him, she said coldly, "Awake?" Yiming rubbed his head, looking very distressed. Nangong Yun placed the breakfast on the bedside table and gave him a displeased look. "Hurry up and get up to wash, come eat breakfast." "I don't have an appetite." Yiming shook his head, refusing. Last night, she was like an octopus, pushing him to one side, and when he woke up in a daze, he found her pressing her thigh on him. He hadn't slept well all night, and now he just wanted to sleep. "You have to eat even if you don't have an appetite," Nangong Yun said, pulling him up. Yiming pursed his lips and obediently got up to brush his teeth and wash his face. "My mother will come over at noon, so mind your behavior," Nangong Yun reminded. "I know," Yiming waved his hand, sounding very impatient. "You'd better remember my words, or you'll be the one regretting it." After saying this, she left without looking back. Noon. A black extended Rolls-Royce drove into the South Palace estate, and the servants respectfully opened the car door. A beautiful woman stepped out of the car, wearing a white casual suit, with long shiny black hair cascading down her shoulders, and wearing sunglasses that partially covered her face, but couldn't hide her elegant and noble demeanor. "Mr. Nan, you're here," Lu Yufei bowed respectfully. Nan Gongqing nodded. "I heard Sen Yun has found a boyfriend and they even got married?" Lu Yufei smiled. "Yes. During this time, have you noticed anything?" Nan Gongqing knew her daughter's temperament. They say a mother knows her daughter best, and most of the time, she could tell if they were really in a relationship with just one glance. Lu Yufei hesitated and answered softly, "No." Nan Gongqing raised an eyebrow. "No?" "Yes," Lu Yufei nodded, then added, "Miss Xian Yun gets along very well with Mr. Yiming. I can tell that she has feelings for him." "Oh?" Nan Gongqing was curious. After all, she trusted Lu Yufei, and hearing her say this made her curious. "Since you said that, I'd like to meet him." After speaking, the two walked towards the living room. As they entered, they saw Yiming sitting on the sofa, idly watching TV. He wore a pure white shirt with jeans, looking youthful and lively, with a hint of innocence, making it hard to look away. Seeing him, Nan Gongqing thought to herself, "Indeed, he looks good. He's my type." Yiming didn't notice their arrival at all, just staring blankly at the cartoon. Lu Yufei wanted to remind him, but Nan Gongqing stopped her with a gesture. She walked up behind Yiming, not saying a word. She wanted to see how alert he was, but after standing there for 2 minutes, he still hadn't noticed anything. If it weren't for Nan Gongyun coming down from upstairs and calling out to him, he probably wouldn't have looked back. Nan Gongyun was also amazed. How could this young man be so clueless? After realizing that the beautiful woman in front of him was Nan Gongyun's mother, Yiming immediately stood up, awkwardly smiling. Hello, Auntie." Nan Gongyun nodded in satisfaction, looking at him. The more she looked, the more pleasing he seemed. But his intelligence needs improvement. Nan Gongqing smiled and nodded lightly, asking, "Are you my daughter's boyfriend?" Yiming nodded awkwardly, "Yes." "What's your name? How old are you this year? What does your mother do?" Nan Gongqing bombarded Yiming with a series of questions. After answering them one by one, Nan Gongqing nodded in satisfaction. Although he seemed a bit foolish, she found him quite likable. At least he was obedient. Most importantly, this kind of man is easy to control. No complicated background, no strong interpersonal relationships. For them, a person without any background is no different from an ant. She glanced at Yiming, then at Nan Gongyun, and immediately sensed that their relationship was not pure. She could tell that Yiming was resistant to her daughter, while Nan Gongyun was not. However, Nan Gongqing didn't expose them, just calmly asked, "Xiaoming, how did you and Xian Yun meet?" Yiming was stunned, not knowing how to answer, and Nan Gongyun, seeing his expression, quickly intervened. "Mom, Xiaoming and I were college classmates. We've been in touch before, and we only officially became boyfriend and girlfriend yesterday." Hearing this, Nan Gongqing was now certain that they were not in a romantic relationship, but perhaps had reached some kind of agreement. "Even if it's fake, I want to make it real. It's rare to meet a boy who is willing to get close to Xian Yun. How could I let him go?" Thinking of this, she decided to go along with their act. "So you're college classmates. I see this boy is not bad, good-looking and worthy of my Xian Yun," Nan Gongqing praised. "Thank you for the compliment, Aunt Nangong," Yiming politely smiled. Nan Gongqing nodded, then glanced at Nan Gongyun. "Would you accompany me for a walk outside?" She wanted to talk to him alone. Nan Gongyun coldly responded. Watching them leave, Yi Ming finally breathed a sigh of relief. Like mother, like daughter. Although Nan Gongqing's tone was gentle, there was still immense pressure emanating from her. From her demeanor, it was clear that she held a high position for a long time. The authority and dominance she exuded were not something an ordinary person could possess, not to mention her deep and sharp gaze, which would make most people feel restrained in her presence. Nan Gongyun accompanied her mother outside, and the two remained silent. After a while, Nan Gongqing turned to her. Xian Yun, tell me the truth, do you like this boy? Nan Gongyun was somewhat surprised. She knew her mother would find out, but she didn't expect her to figure it out so quickly. She bit her lip and nodded gently. I don't know if I like him, but whenever I'm with him, I feel an impulse to make him mine. Well, you're quite frank, Nan Gongqing chuckled, then reached out to pat her head and continued, in that case, I hope you can keep him by your side as much as possible. Nan Gongyun remained silent. She didn't understand her own feelings. It had only been a few days, but his face would always appear in her mind, and she would even fantasize about being intimate with him. Seeing her daughter silent, Nan Gongqing picked a peony from the garden. Xian Yun, what do you think this flower is made of? Hearing this, Nan Gongyun looked at the peony in Nan Gongqing's hand. It's made up of roots and leaves. Nan Gongqing nodded. That's right, the shape of the roots represents the essence of the plant, and the pattern of the leaves represents the shape of the flower. She then broke the peony in half, holding one part in each hand. A broken peony means they are unrelated. Both parts will take root and grow into a new plant when planted in the ground. But if they are grafted together, they will become a completely new peony. It's just a matter of time. Nan Gongqing stacked them together, as if they could never be separated, firmly locked. Watching her mother break the peony in half and stack it back together, she suddenly understood what her mother was doing. From start to finish, their separation and reunion were all in her mother's hands, and from the beginning, she had likened this peony to Yi Ming and herself. Xian Yun, do you know? Actually, your father hates me very much. Nan Gongqing suddenly smiled bitterly. Perhaps he never loved me, but I still love him. Because I love him, he can only be mine. Nan Gongyun was speechless, because she didn't know how to respond. For her, she was indeed a good mother, but for her father, she was a madwoman who would stop at nothing to achieve her goals. Nan Gongqing looked at her daughter. She knew that it was already very lucky for her to meet a man who didn't reject her. Nan Gongyun was very smart, she had always seen that, but she was clueless when it came to emotions. And because of her mental issues, she had never been interested in boys. Even when some suitors tried to impress her, she remained unmoved. She was afraid that she wouldn't be able to hold her granddaughter when she got old, so she kept urging her to go on blind dates, but it was of no use. Now, her daughter has finally met a boy she doesn't reject and likes. She must help her daughter seize this opportunity. Xian Yun, Mom is just telling you that opportunities only come once, so you must seize it firmly, Nan Gongqing said with great concern. Nan Gongyun responded in silence. She didn't want to be like her mother, she didn't want to become so crazy. Nan Gongqing also saw her thoughts and sighed in her heart. She always hoped that her daughter could have a happy and fulfilling marriage, but unfortunately, that child cannot belong to you alone. When the two returned from outside, it was already noon. They didn't see Yi Ming, so Nan Gongyun asked Lu Yufei in confusion, Aunt Lu, where is Xiaoming? Lu Yufei looked upstairs and smiled. Mr. Yi felt bored just now, so he went upstairs first. Nan Gongyun nodded and turned to Nan Gongqing, saying, Mom, I'll go call Xiaoming down. We'll have dinner later. Then she said to Lu Yufei, Aunt Lu, thank you. Okay, Lu Yufei said and went to the kitchen to instruct the chefs. Nan Gongyun went upstairs, pushed open the door, and found Yi Ming in the room talking on the phone. When he heard the movement, he looked up and saw Nan Gongyun, then continued talking. Nan Gongyun didn't disturb him, but closed the door and sat quietly by the bed. The person on the phone was Zhao Fanlong, Yi Ming's college classmate. He had a delicate appearance and was slightly shorter than Yi Ming. Ming Ji, can you check if you're free the day after tomorrow? Let's go to the amusement park. Yi Ming thought for a moment and found that he indeed had nothing to do the day after tomorrow, so he said to the phone, Okay, I don't have anything to do the day after tomorrow. Yes, that's great. Zhao Fanlong couldn't help but shout excitedly, let's settle it like this. Ming Ji, you can't stand me up. Yi Ming chuckled, don't worry, I won't. Okay, that's settled. We'll meet at the Tomato Amusement Park. After hanging up the phone, Nan Gongyun sitting on the bed asked coldly, who were you talking to just now? Yi Ming looked at her in confusion. Do I need to tell you who I was talking to? They only had a working relationship, and he didn't need to report everything to her. Nan Gongyun frowned, displeased, and said, are you going out the day after tomorrow? Yi Ming responded lightly. Seeing his reaction, did she have to manage this matter too? Nan Gongyan took a deep breath and forced herself to calm down. Is it a man or a woman? Hey, it's nothing. We just have a simple business relationship. I don't need to tell you everything, and my private matters have nothing to do with you, Yiming said, a little annoyed. Although she was the young lady of the Nangong family, she couldn't unreasonably restrict others' movements, especially since their relationship was just a signed contract. I'm asking you, is it a man or a woman? Nan Gongyan's eyes darkened, her tone icy. I said, we just have a simple business relationship. I don't need to tell you anything, and my private matters have nothing to do with you, Yiming said, standing up to leave. Yiming! Nan Gongyan shouted sternly, and seeing Yiming's fearless back, she pulled him back and pushed him onto the bed. What are you doing? Yiming was startled by her actions. Tell me, who were you talking to on the phone? Nan Gongyan stared coldly at Yiming, her tone carrying a warning. Why should I tell you? Who are you to me? Yiming was also a little angry. He really couldn't understand what this woman wanted to do. What did it have to do with her if it was a woman? The tube is so wide. Nan Gongyan gritted her teeth and said, just because I am your legal wife now. After speaking, she reached out and grabbed his neck, almost crushing his throat with great force. A suffocating feeling came over him, his face turning slightly red, as Yiming struggled to breathe and tried to push away her hands. Seeing this, Nan Gongyan loosened her grip, and looked at him coldly, saying, tell me, who is she to you? Cough, 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 I. Cough. Won't serve you anymore, the contract is terminated, Yiming gasped, struggling to speak. Nan Gongyan was momentarily stunned, then her gaze turned even colder as she said, do you think I would give you that right? Ignoring her threat, Yiming pushed her away and said, I'm done with you. The contract clearly states that Party A cannot force Party B to do anything, otherwise the contract is void. After speaking, Yiming stood up, packed his clothes into a suitcase, and prepared to leave. You dare! Nan Gongyan immediately grabbed his arm, not allowing him to leave. Do you think I dare? Yiming snorted coldly, shaking off her arm and finishing packing. Watching his resolute figure, Nan Gongyan took a deep breath, suppressed her anger, and said coldly, fine, it's my fault, but I still want to ask, after all, I am your legal wife now. Yiming, who had intended to leave, stopped in his tracks and turned to look at her. He had wanted to mock her, but seeing her current expression, he could honestly say that if he were to say, oh, now you're talking to me about being your legal wife, I won't serve you anymore, get lost, he might end up being reincarnated. Yiming pursed his lips, realizing that what she said was not entirely unreasonable. After all, she was the daughter of the prominent Nangong family in the Magic City. If he were seen with another woman, it would definitely be exploited by the unscrupulous media. He had not known Nan Gongyan's background before, but her name sounded familiar, so he had looked her up online. Well, Nan Gongyan turned out to be a big shot in the Magic City, the daughter of Nangong Cheng. Seeing this information, he understood why she could spend a fortune to buy the land at Shanhu residence. Nan Gongyan looked at him and said in a deep voice, I just want to know what your relationship is with that person. After seeing her serious expression, Yiming sighed lightly and said slowly, he was my friend from college, a man. Hearing this, Nan Gongyan's expression softened slightly, and she felt a sense of relief in her heart. When she realized this, she found it somewhat unbelievable. For some reason, whenever this little man refused her requests, she would become very angry, as if her possessions had suddenly developed a rebellious spirit. She didn't understand why she had developed such a strange feeling for him. Perhaps it was because the only man she didn't reject was him? Or was it because he was too good-looking? Nan Gongyan collected her thoughts and looked at the man in front of her, feeling an indescribable sensation. She said with a stern face, all right, stop throwing a tantrum. If a scandal breaks out, it will have a big impact on me. I hope you understand this. Yes, I also didn't consider it carefully just now. Let's put this matter behind us. All right, give me your luggage. Nan Gongyan reached out and took the suitcase from him. Before Yiming could react, she picked up the luggage and walked out. Seeing this scene, Yiming was stunned for a moment, then quickly caught up and hurriedly asked, hey, where are you taking my luggage? Inside were his ID and bank cards, and if she took them, it would cause problems for him, such as taking the high-speed train. Nan Gongyan didn't stop, and her cold voice came from the doorway. I put your luggage with Aunt Lu. I think it's in the way in the room. Yiming's face darkened instantly. This woman was too domineering, wanting to move all his luggage and complaining that it was in the way. As Nan Gongyan left the door, she even reminded him, get ready for lunch and tidy up. After saying that, she disappeared from his sight. Yiming looked at her back and made a fist behind her. It's a wonder anyone likes a domineering woman like you. He muttered under his breath, then put on his shoes and went downstairs to the hall. Nangong Cheng was sitting on the sofa reading a book. When she heard footsteps, she looked up and greeted him with a smile, come and sit down. Thank you, Aunt Nangong, Yiming obediently called out, then found a seat. Nangong Chang looked at Yiming and gently said, still calling me aunt? Yiming hesitated for a moment, then awkwardly called out, aunt-in-law. Nangong Cheng nodded, looking at Yiming with increasing satisfaction. She couldn't help but smile and said, Xiaoming, what do you think of Xian Yun? Xian Yun is pretty good, Yiming replied with a smile. Although their personalities were quite different, he didn't think there was anything wrong with this woman except for her bad temper. Nangong Cheng looked at his expression and already had an answer in her heart. She had studied micro-expressions and could easily tell if a boy like Yiming was lying. Although she could see that Yiming's words didn't match his true feelings, Nangong Cheng didn't expose it. She just said somewhat regretfully, Xiaoming, Xian Yun has a bit of a bad temper. When you're with her, you should give in to her more. Don't be fooled by her appearance, she's quite stubborn in matters of the heart. At this point, Nangong Cheng suddenly changed the subject, but don't be afraid of her. If she dares to bully you, just come back to me, and I'll teach her a lesson. Hearing this, warmth flowed through Yiming's heart. It seemed that his mother-in-law was a gentle person. He faintly smiled and said, okay, aunt-in-law, I'll remember. Good boy. Nangong Cheng patted Yiming's head, full of affection. Nangong Yun had hidden Yiming's suitcase, and when she came back and saw the scene, she was instantly displeased. Mom, what are you doing with Xiaoming? Oh, nothing, I was just chatting with Xiaoming. With that, she stood up. Let's have lunch first. It's already this late, and I should go back after eating. Oh, okay. The three of them sat around the table for lunch. During the meal, Nangong Cheng occasionally picked food for Yiming and was particularly warm in her attitude, as if Yiming were her own son. Nangong Yun felt extremely depressed seeing this, but she couldn't say anything. Xiaoming, when are you two getting married? Nangong Cheng asked tentatively as she picked food for Yiming. Cough, cough. Yiming choked on his soup and coughed violently a few times, then waved his hand. Aunt-in-law, what did you say? Nangong Cheng continued to pick food for him with a smile and said, Xiaoming, you're not young anymore, and you and Xian Yun are the same age, so I think. Nangong Yun, who was listening on the side, furrowed her brow and couldn't help but interrupt her. Mom, Xiaoming and I have already registered for marriage. We just didn't have a wedding ceremony to avoid making a big fuss. Registered? Nangong Cheng was surprised. Yes, we registered yesterday afternoon. Nangong Yun spoke coldly. This matter wasn't a secret anyway, and it was just a deal with her. She just didn't expect Nangong Cheng to figure it out. Ha ha. Good, good. Nangong Cheng said happily. Then when are you going to pick a date for the wedding? Our Nangong family has many customs, and we must have a wedding ceremony, otherwise, I won't feel at ease. Yiming's mouth twitched. With the Nangong family's reputation in the city, if they held a wedding banquet, he could guarantee that he would be in the headlines tomorrow, and it would be the top trending news. When it comes to divorce, it will be even more difficult, and it will become a hot topic again, which will greatly affect my future life and leave me with no privacy. But at that time, I didn't think about this. Yiming couldn't help but feel a headache, and could only talk to Nangong Yun again at night, at least to see if there was any other way. I have my own plans for this, Nangong Yun said coldly. Seeing this, Nangong Cheng didn't force her. Alright, I won't pressure you. You arrange it yourself, as long as you're happy. After discussing the family situation, they dispersed. Nangong Cheng turned to the two of them at the door and said, alright, you can go back now. With that, she got into the car and left, while Nangong Yun watched the luxury car slowly drive away. Night fell, and the stars twinkled. After washing up, Yiming lay on the bed, frowning and sighing from time to time. At this moment, Nangong Yun pushed the door open and saw Yiming lying on the bed in pajamas. She didn't say anything, just came to the bedside, took off her clothes, and lay down next to him, wearing only a bra and shorts. Seeing Nangong Yun's actions, Yiming was immediately at a loss. When he reacted, he quickly covered his eyes with his hands. Xian Yun, what are you doing? Nangong Yun looked at him with some surprise and said in a cold voice, I'm going to bed. What else could I be doing? I think I'll go to another room. After saying that, Yiming tried to get up. He didn't dare to stay in the same bed with Nangong Yun. No, as soon as he tried to get up, Nangong Yun grabbed him and said coldly, from now on, you only need to sleep with me. After that, she didn't care whether Yiming agreed or not, and hugged him tightly. Yiming tried to struggle, but her grip was strong, and his face ended up against Nangong Yun's face wash. A stimulating fragrance instantly filled their nostrils, causing both of them to frown. Yiming opened his eyes and met her deep gaze. He was somewhat frightened and tried to move back. Xian Yun, please let go. He was now a little afraid to be alone with her, because her eyes were very strange, as if they were filled with some kind of desire, as if she wanted to devour him. This scared him so much that he became stiff. "No," Nan Gongyan said dominantly, her tone unexpectedly cold. Hearing this, Yiming was completely helpless. He didn't dare to move, afraid of provoking her, as she was capable of anything. He finally understood that she was like the domineering CEO in the idol dramas from his previous life. Powerful and domineering. My goodness, the domineering female lead that I used to mock in the past life has now become me. At first glance, I didn't know it was a drama within a drama, but now it's clear that I'm a character in the drama. I'm not used to this. Yiming reluctantly uttered these words. Nan Gongyan still didn't let go, and said coldly, "I like to hold you while sleeping. I will always hold you like this in the future." She felt that holding him while sleeping would be reassuring, and his scent was very pleasant. She even longed for this scent. Yiming wanted to say something. Nan Gongyan interrupted him coldly, "Shut up. I don't like to hear nonsense." Yiming was stunned, then silently closed his eyes and resigned himself to it. It was best not to provoke her at this time, to avoid her doing something to hurt him later. "Go to sleep." Seeing that Yiming finally behaved, Nan Gongyan snorted coldly and hugged him tightly. Yiming smiled bitterly. This woman was really domineering. Looking at her cold and elegant sleeping face, he was momentarily distracted. She was exquisite, and compared to the previous female celebrities, she was on a completely different level, definitely a goddess. And she had that kind of aloof and mature woman vibe. Not only that, her skin is delicate and can be broken with a touch, and her figure is well proportioned. Such a girl is indeed very attractive. However, Yiming sighed in his heart, it would be better if this overbearing boss wasn't so fierce, always forcing others to do things they don't want to do day after day. The next day, a ray of sunlight shone through the window into the room, falling on their cheeks. Yiming rubbed his eyes, stretched lazily, and suddenly felt sore in his waist, as if he had been crushed. Ouch, it hurts so much. He gasped for breath. He had been tossed around until past 3 in the morning yesterday, and only got up at 9:30 this morning. He felt like he was falling apart. This was not retirement, it was clearly torture. He thought he could retire here peacefully and be a handsome man, but coming here, not only did he not sleep well every day, but he was also bullied by this woman. "Do you dare to say another dirty word?" Just as Yiming was complaining, Nan Gongyan's icy voice echoed in his ears. Yiming looked at Nan Gongyan, who was already dressed neatly beside him, and felt a wave of despair. How could he forget that this overbearing boss was still around? Seeing Yiming's dejected look, she didn't speak, but took out a book on male virtue she had bought from Lu Yufei and threw it in front of him. "This is male virtue. I hope you can change these bad habits." Male virtue? Yiming looked at the red-covered book in front of him and couldn't help but smile wryly. "Xian Yun, I don't need this." "Don't need it?" Nan Gongyan gave him a cold glance. "You speak vulgarly and act rudely like a woman. Try telling me again that you don't need it," she threatened coldly. Yiming fell silent. No matter what he said, it was useless, because he had already felt the anger emanating from her. Seeing his expression, Nan Gongyan's face remained cold, without the slightest change. Yiming even felt that this overbearing boss had a poker face. "You better change the habit of swearing today, otherwise don't blame me for being ruthless," Nan Gongyan said coldly, her tone full of killing intent. Yiming looked down at the male virtue, speechless. This overbearing boss was really hard to serve. Although he complained in his heart, facing such a queen, Yiming could only choose to obey. He flipped through the male virtue, scanning the contents at a glance. Looking at these characters, he couldn't help but raise his eyebrows. Wasn't this too difficult to remember? And there were so many rules. Yiming stole a glance at her and found her standing at the door, looking at him. He immediately averted his gaze. Feeling guilty, Yiming cleared his throat and pretended to continue reading the male virtue. He recognized these words, but when they were put together, he felt a little overwhelmed. Nan Gongyan looked at his absent-minded appearance, and her cold expression suddenly darkened. She approached him and took the male virtue, pointing to each rule one by one. The first article of male virtue. The first rule is that everything must be done according to the husband's duty, including matters in bed. The second rule is to listen to the wife's words and not to contradict or disobey the wife. The third rule is to obey the wife's decisions. The fourth rule is that everything is decided by the wife. The fifth rule. As she counted one rule after another, Yiming's forehead sweated, and he felt like crying. This was also the reason why he had never wanted to get married. There were too many damn rules. And a son married is a son gone, with no family, only the wife is his family. And there were several rules in it that were really damn annoying. Seeing his absent-minded look, Nan Gongyan suddenly slapped Yiming's buttocks. Smack! A crisp sound echoed in the room. "Ah, it hurts. Nan Gongyan, what are you doing?" Yiming cried out, covering his buttocks, glaring at Nan Gongyan with resentment. You were distracted just now, so you deserve to be punished. Nan Gongyun looked at him coldly, her icy gaze making him shiver. Yi Ming felt frustrated, unable to hold back cursing in his heart. Damn, this marriage to the tyrant is so suffocating. I mean, Xian Yun, we're at least fake husband and wife, you don't have to treat me like this, right? Yi Ming stared at her with a look of despair. Nan Gongyun frowned, coldly looking at him with her frost-covered face. Now you are my nominal husband, your every word and action will affect me, understand? Besides us, those people don't know, Yi Ming muttered in a slightly aggrieved voice. What did you say? Nan Gongyun narrowed her phoenix eyes, locking her cold gaze on him. Yi Ming shrank his neck in fear, quickly shaking his head, and nothing. Humph. Nan Gongyun snorted, putting down the book and walking to the door. As she left, she coldly added, you better get rid of this habit of swearing, otherwise when I come back tonight, you won't need to go out tomorrow. With that, without waiting for Yi Ming's reaction, she slammed the door shut. Watching the closed door, Yi Ming rubbed his but, this tyrant really has some issues. How come I didn't notice her explosive temper when we first met? Yi Ming couldn't help but feel regretful. Oh well, it's no use arguing with her. He tossed the book on male virtues aside, lay on the bed, and picked up his phone to watch videos. It's worth mentioning that the short videos in this world are called tomato short videos, and novels, movies, and TV shows are almost all dominated by tomatoes. This is truly the leading company in the entertainment industry, with at least 5 billion daily active users, showing how exaggerated it is. Nan Jia, we can sign the contract for the Mountain Lake residence today. Here's the contract. In a Rolls-Royce business car, Lu Qingqing took out a contract and placed it on the table. Nan Gongyun nodded, then picked it up and looked through it for a while. After confirming that there were no issues, she picked up a pen and signed her name on the contract, then handed it to Lu Qingqing. She looked at Lu Qingqing's tired appearance and coldly said, you've worked hard on the negotiations for the Mountain Lake residence this time. Nan Jia, you're too kind. This is what I should do. Lu Qingqing looked at her with some surprise. After all, everything she had now came from Nan Gongyun, so Lu Qingqing had an exceptional respect for her. Originally, she was just a girl from a remote mountain village who didn't know anything, and she kept getting rejected when she applied for jobs. The cost of living in the city was quite high, and she needed money for rent and food. She had been in the city for 3 months without finding a job and almost starved on the streets. Although she could go back, she didn't want to be looked down upon by her family and gossiped about by the villagers, so she persisted. Finally, she met Nan Gongyun. It was this cold woman in front of her who gave her a chance, so her loyalty to Nan Gongyun was unwavering. As long as she was given a task, she would do her best to complete it and never disappoint her, because she was afraid of letting her down. Nan Gongyun coldly responded, then for some reason, she suddenly thought of Yi Ming. After thinking for a while, she said to Lu Qingqing, Ah Cheng, I will give you a list of materials to purchase later, you can start arranging it. Okay, Nan Jia. Lu Qingqing respectfully replied. Also, rebuild a villa at the Mountain Lake residence, a little further from the scenic spot, and build a basement in that villa using the materials I provide. Nan Gongyun continued to instruct. Okay, Nan Jia. Lu Qingqing responded again, although she didn't understand why Nan Gongyun suddenly wanted to build a villa. But she understood that she shouldn't ask what she shouldn't ask, just do as told. Knowing too much about certain things wouldn't benefit her. The two arrived at Shanhu residence. As soon as they got out of the car, a middle-aged woman hurried over to greet them. She was the manager of Shanhu residence, named Zhang Qingwen. Nan Zong, you're here. Please come inside. Nan Gongyun glanced coldly at the middle-aged woman in front of her, then followed her inside. Sitting down in the office, she was offered tea by Zhang Qingwen. With a warm smile, Zhang Qingwen looked at her with her cloudy eyes, shining with shrewdness and wisdom. This person in front of her was a big shot in the city, someone she would never have the chance to meet in her lifetime if she didn't happen to have plans to acquire this piece of land. Nan Gongyun coldly responded, exuding a powerful aura with a hint of sharpness and arrogance that couldn't be ignored. At this moment, Lu Qingqing approached and placed the contract on the table. Zhang Zong, Nan Zong has already signed here. Please review it, and if there are no issues, we can proceed with the cooperation. No problem, no problem. Upon hearing this, Zhang Qingwen quickly picked up the contract and signed her name without even looking at it. After all, when she came to acquire the land, she offered twice the price, and with the background and means of the Nangong family, she didn't need to pay at all. After all, where do the backsides of businessmen ever stay clean? As long as she used a little bit of her connections, her own bottom line could be exposed. But she didn't do that. Zhang Qingwen understood that Nanzong was not interested in doing so. By doing this, she simply wanted to prove that she could still dominate the economy of the city without relying on connections. How could one easily offend such a person? Otherwise, if she angered her, it would be her own misfortune. Since there are no issues, let's proceed with the cooperation. Lu Qingqing took the contract handed over by Zhang Qingwen, checked it, and then put it away. Alright, no problem. Let's proceed with the cooperation. Zhang Qingwen quickly stood up, shook hands with Lu Qingqing, and accompanied her with a smile. Seeing that the contract was already signed, Nan Gongyan stood up. Her figure was perfect and tall, standing at 183 meters. Wearing an expensive black suit, she appeared domineering and aloof. Now that the contract is signed, we will take our leave. Nan Gongyan said coldly to Zhang Qingwen. Alright, I'll see Nan Zong off. Zhang Qingwen quickly went up to her and respectfully followed behind her. She faintly responded and then left. Once in the car, Nan Gongyan said to Lu Qingqing in front of her, I've sent you the materials on your phone. Okay, Nan Jia, I'll go take care of it right away. After speaking, Lu Qingqing quickly took out her phone and checked the message. When Nan Gongyan returned to Shanhu Villa, it was already night. The villa was built in a clearing in the forest, surrounded by lush green trees, making it even more serene and beautiful. There were over 100 bodyguards inside and outside the villa, and ordinary people wouldn't dare to trespass unless permitted by Nan Gongyan. There were surveillance cameras all around and very good security facilities. Not to mention ordinary people, even special agents would find it difficult to infiltrate. Nan Gongyan arrived in the living room, where Lu Yufei had already prepared dinner for her return. Xian Yun is back. Dinner is ready in the hall, and Mr. Yi is waiting for you. Nan Gongyan nodded indifferently, then walked towards the hall and saw Yi Mingjing sitting obediently at the dining table. Upon seeing her arrival, Yi Ming looked up at her and complained, Xian Yun, you're finally back. I was starving. He deliberately put on a pitiful expression, resembling an abandoned stray dog, which made people can't help but feel sorry for him. However, his acting skills were seen through by Nan Gongyan, who thought it was all fake. In fact, Yi Ming had been hungry for a while and wanted to eat, but Lu Yufei wouldn't allow it. She said, Xiaoming, as Xian Yun's husband, how can you eat alone? You have to wait for your wife before you can start eating. But Yi Ming wanted to argue, but when he met her cold and stern gaze, he had to swallow his words and hang his head in frustration. Nan Gongyan didn't say anything, she just sat down next to him and coldly said, let's eat, stop pretending. Hearing her mention eating, Yi Ming's face instantly brightened, and he picked up his chopsticks and said, okay. Then he picked up a piece of chicken and stuffed it into his mouth. Wait, Nan Gongyan coldly snorted, reaching out and taking the chicken leg from his bowl, saying in a chilly tone, have you forgotten your manners? Why are you so rude? Yi Ming awkwardly scratched the back of his head and smiled sheepishly, Xian Yun, I'm used to it, I'll pay attention next time. After that, he picked up another piece of chicken and tried to put it in his mouth. Nan Gongyan didn't say anything more, she just ate by herself. After a few bites, she elegantly wiped her mouth and then asked, what time are you going out tomorrow? I have an appointment with them at the Tomato Theme Park at 10 o'clock tomorrow morning, Yi Ming replied. I'll take you there tomorrow, Nan Gongyan said indifferently. I can manage it myself, Yi Ming mumbled with a mouthful of chicken, and Nan Gongyan, looking at his appearance, felt her anger rising. Finish eating before you speak. Nan Gongyan's voice was very cold, and she couldn't help but frown at the sight of his greasy mouth. I said, I don't need it, I can go by myself. Yi Ming wiped his mouth with a tissue and explained seriously. He didn't want Nan Gongyan to have too much contact with Zhao Fanlong, and he didn't want them to know about his relationship with Nan Gongyan. There's no car here, how are you going to go out? Can you drive? Nan Gongyan asked coldly. No, Yi Ming shook his head, then asked, are there no buses here? No, Nan Gongyan replied coldly. It's settled then, she said, getting up and walking out the door. Yi Ming looked at her back and sighed helplessly, forget it, I'll just explain it to Long later. After finishing his meal, Yi Ming returned to the bedroom and saw Nan Gongyan lying on the bed in a new outfit. At this moment, she was wearing a black lace nightgown, sexy and alluring, with her long legs exposed in the air, making him unsure where to look. Yi Ming blushed and lowered his head, went to the closet, found his own pajamas, and went to the bathroom to take a shower. The sound of running water filled Nan Gongyan's ears as she turned to look at the bathroom door, her eyes flashing a few times, lost in thought. When Yi Ming finished his shower and came out, he saw Nan Gongyan lying on the bed. He hesitated for a moment but slowly walked over. He lay down slowly, but only on the edge of the bed. As soon as he lay down, Nan Gongyan reached out and pulled him into her arms, and before Yi Ming could react, he was forced to endure a wave of facial cleanser. The faint scent of milk stimulated his nerves, and he wanted to push her away, but it was futile. He couldn't move her at all, and with his movements, Nan Gongyan's hand tightened even more. Xian Yun, please. Yi Ming cried out helplessly, hoping she would let go of him, but she ignored him, refusing to even look at him as if she hadn't heard him. "Nangong-yun, please let me go." Yiming struggled, but the more he struggled, the tighter she held onto him, their bodies pressed closely together, feeling each other's warmth. "I warn you, if you dare to move, I'll break your legs," Nangong-yun threatened fiercely. "Nangong-yun, are you out of your mind?" Yiming gasped for breath, feeling suffocated, but Nangong-yun remained unmoved. He had no choice but to forcefully pry her hands off him. "Nangong-yun, can you please stop this?" Yiming freed himself from her grasp, annoyed. They had only signed a contract, and her actions clearly violated it. "Since when do I need your instructions? I like holding you like this, do you have a say in it?" Nangong-yun said, hugging him tightly again. For some reason, she felt angry, especially when Yiming rejected her, making her even angrier, as if something of hers had betrayed her, making her uncomfortable. "You're just unreasonable and overbearing." Yiming glared at her angrily, pushed her hand away, and turned his back on her, ignoring her. Nangong-yun looked at her hand that had been pushed away, then at his back, her cold and beautiful face turning even colder. She reached out with her strong jade hands, grabbed his shoulders, and forcefully turned him around, then hugged him tightly. "Hey, let go, Nangong-yun, I warn you." Before he could finish speaking, Nangong-yun covered his lips, leaving Yiming wide-eyed in shock. He never expected Nangong-yun to do such a thing. He struggled desperately to break free from her restraint, but no matter what he did, she held onto his lips tightly, denying him any chance to escape. Nangong-yun's tongue tried to enter his mouth, but he resisted, so she held his chin and he involuntarily opened his mouth, allowing her to explore with her tongue. She aggressively invaded his territory, seemingly trying to prove something. Her kiss was passionate, perhaps for the first time, rough enough to draw blood from the corner of Yiming's mouth. Yiming squirmed uneasily, feeling like he couldn't breathe, and pushed Nangong-yun away with all his strength, then slapped her. Snap! The crisp sound echoed, leaving Yiming stunned. Nangong-yun, lying on the bed, was also bewildered. She touched her cheek, incredulous. He dared to hit me? Feeling a burning sensation on her face, she sat up, her gaze icy as she looked at Yiming, as if he were already dead. Yiming also realized what he had done was purely instinctive. He felt like he was being coldly stared at by a venomous snake, his whole body stiff and at a loss. "If you intended to provoke me, then I'll tell you, you succeeded," Nangong-yun said coldly, then pounced on him. "Nangong-yun, what are you doing?" Yiming was startled by her actions, shouting and trying to push her away, but she pinned him down on the bed and straddled him, looking down at him with a cold tone. "Since you dared to hit me, you have to pay the price." Then she leaned in to kiss him. "Ah, help!" Yiming saw her losing her mind a bit, and quickly shouted towards the door, which directly startled Lu Yufei. She thought something had happened and quickly ran upstairs, knocking on the door. "Xianyun, what's wrong?" There was no sound from inside the room, and after a while, Nangong-yun's cold voice came. "Aunt Lu, nothing's wrong, you go rest first." She calmed down, trying to control her emotions, and Lu Yufei's appearance restored some of her sanity. "All right, take care of yourself," Lu Yufei advised before leaving. Nangong-yun gently closed her eyes, took a few deep breaths, then lowered her head and looked at Yiming beneath her. His fair and delicate skin, exquisite features, thick and long eyelashes, and smooth and tender skin made her unconsciously look at him more, and her heartbeat inexplicably quickened. There was a hint of a different color in her eyes, but it was only a brief moment, and she restrained the different color in her eyes. She got off Yiming and then lay on the bed, holding him tightly, as if he were her most beloved teddy bear. Yiming dared not move, fearing that Nangong-yun would be unhappy and do something excessive. However, although Nangong-yun held him tightly, she did not do anything out of line, and Yiming gradually let go of his guard and slowly fell asleep. Once he entered a state of sleep, he rarely woke up, so he did not see the cold light flashing in Nangong-yun's eyes. Nangong-yun stared at Yiming's exquisite face and couldn't help but raise her hand to touch it, murmuring to herself, "Yiming, I realize I've started to like you a little bit." The next morning, the sunlight shone through the curtains into the room. Yiming squinted his eyes, stretched lazily, and then lazily got out of bed. He had slept deeply last night, and he found it a bit strange. He looked at the bedside and found that Nangong-yun was no longer there, so he rubbed his eyes and went to the bathroom to get ready. But when he looked at himself in the mirror, he was dumbfounded. "Oh my, what's wrong with my mouth?" Yiming looked at the slightly swollen lips and cracked lower lip in the mirror, feeling a bit confused. How did they swell overnight? He recalled last night, although Nangong-yun had bitten his mouth and made it bleed, it wasn't this serious. Is it infected? Yiming was puzzled, then sighed. Forget it, it doesn't seem too serious. Then he started to get ready. What he didn't know was that when he was asleep, Nangong-yun's passionate kiss had left marks all over his body, and after a night, the marks were truly shocking. Even his lips had several cuts. After getting ready, Yiming went downstairs and saw Nan Gongyun sitting on the sofa in an expensive suit, crossing her legs and reading the newspaper. She heard the movement, glanced at Yiming, and then continued to read the newspaper, saying lightly, "Have breakfast in the kitchen first, and after eating, I'll take you to the Tomato Amusement Park." "Okay." Yiming responded, and he had wanted to say something, but when he saw Nan Gongyun focused on the newspaper, he thought for a moment and decided not to disturb her. At the breakfast table, Yiming looked at the sumptuous breakfast in front of him and suddenly lost his appetite, only drinking a few sips of milk. After breakfast, the two set off for the Tomato Amusement Park. The Tomato Amusement Park was located near the bustling streets of the city, surrounded by bustling traffic and crowded people, exceptionally lively, and was a highly renowned amusement park. And because it was the weekend, the flow of people was unusually high. Xiaolong asked if Xiaoming has arrived. Beside Zhao Fanglong, a tall woman said, "Oh sister, you've asked me 10 times, Ming Ge is still on the way." Zhao Fanglong said somewhat helplessly. She had already said it several times, but she kept asking. This wheat-skinned, tall woman is Zhao Shuer, Zhao Fanglong's sister. She used to attend the same school as Yiming at Huaxia Business University. Zhao Fanglong knows that Zhao Shuer likes Yiming, so he always uses his own name to invite Yiming out to play, but he understands Yiming's personality. He doesn't like his own sister, even though she looks good and is also in the sports department at school. He has tried to matchmake them a few times, but it was all in vain. While they were chatting, Yiming had already arrived behind them. Originally, it was Nan Gongyun who wanted to bring himself over, but he was rejected. Jokingly, a Rolls-Royce Phantom stopped here, and he couldn't imagine the commotion it would cause. With his own appearance, he would probably attract attention as soon as he arrived. Yiming patted Zhao Fanglong, feeling someone tapping him. He turned and saw Yiming. At this moment, Yiming was wearing light blue casual clothes and white sneakers, making him look charming yet with a hint of innocence. When Zhao Fanglong saw Yiming, his eyes lit up. "Ming Ge, you're finally here." Zhao Shuer looked at Yiming, her cheeks slightly red, and somewhat shyly said, Xiao Ming, hello." "Hello," Yiming politely smiled. His impression of Zhao Fanglong's sister was not bad. "Shuer, don't be shy," Zhao Fanglong playfully approached, looking like a flatterer. "You brat," asking for a beating, Zhao Shuer slapped Zhao Fanglong on the butt. "Ah, that hurts. Are you trying to murder your little brother?" "Humph, serves you right for trying to make your sister happy." Yiming looked at their interaction, feeling a bit embarrassed, and smiled awkwardly. "You two have a good relationship." At these words, Zhao Shuer scratched her head awkwardly. It's okay. By the way, Xiaoming, you haven't had lunch yet, have you? Are you hungry now?" Zhao Shuer looked at Yiming with some anticipation. "I had something to eat just now, not too hungry." Yiming shook his head. "Oh, okay then." Zhao Shuer felt a bit disappointed. Originally, she wanted to have lunch with Yiming to get closer. Seeing his sister's expression, Zhao Fanglong felt helpless. "Let's go, Ming Ge, let's go play on the big swing. My friend said it's really fun." Without waiting for Yiming's response, he dragged him to buy tickets. As he left, he winked at his sister, thinking to himself, "This is all I can do to help, don't blame me, sister." Zhao Shuer understood his expression and immediately gave him a thumbs up. Yiming was most afraid of such stimulating things, and when the time comes, I'll sit next to him and he'll hold on to me tightly. Thinking of this, Zhao Shuer suddenly felt a little excited. She couldn't wait. The big swing in the amusement park was set about 500 meters away. Zhao Fanglong pulled Yiming, looking eager to try it out. Yiming looked at the big swing and suddenly felt the urge to run away. Yiming worriedly asked, "Are we really going to ride this?" "Yes, Ming Ge, hurry up, let's go in while there are few people," Zhao Fanglong said eagerly, as if he couldn't wait. But I'm afraid of heights." Yiming hesitated. "Oh, it's okay, you can sit next to Shuer, and if you're scared, you can hold on to her." "Then forget it, you guys go ahead, I'll wait for you down here." Yiming immediately turned to leave. Seeing this, Zhao Fanglong hurriedly stopped him, pleading, "Ming Ge, if you're not here, what's the point of playing? Please, just play once." It's settled, Ming Ge, I'm begging you," Zhao Fanglong pleaded again. "Well, okay." Yiming looked at Zhao Fanglong's pitiful appearance and finally relented. Zhao Fanglong was overjoyed when Yiming agreed, and he pulled Yiming towards the big swing. After waiting in line for half an hour, it was finally their turn. The big swing was circular, so Zhao Fanglong deliberately had his sister sit between them to assist her. Yiming was a bit nervous, as he had never tried this kind of ride before. As the machine slowly started, Zhao Shuer comforted Yiming, telling him to hold her hand if he was scared. As the swing rose higher and higher, Yiming felt his heart hanging in the air. Meanwhile, a tall woman in a gray t-shirt and blue jeans in the line for the big swing was talking on the phone. On the other end of the phone, Nan Gongyun was furious to hear that Yiming was entangled with another woman. The woman in the line promised to keep an eye on him. After hanging up, Nan Gongyun looked out the window with a dark expression. After the ride, Yiming swore never to play it again, feeling like it had lasted an eternity. Zhao Shuer, on the other hand, felt the time had passed too quickly and wanted to continue. Zhao Fanlong suggested buying ice cream due to the hot weather, and Zhao Shuer volunteered to buy it. Yiming and Zhao Fanlong decided to go together, but Zhao Shuer had already run off. When they caught up to her, she had 3 ice creams and offered them to Yiming and Zhao Fanlong. Yiming accepted the chocolate ice cream and thanked her. She glanced at the time and realized it was already 12:30 and the weather was quite hot. So she suggested, "It's not early, let's go find a place to eat now. It's still very hot." Zhao Fanlong, who was beside her, chimed in, "Okay, I haven't had breakfast this morning." As he spoke, his stomach growled. Zhao Shuer looked at her younger brother, then turned to look at Yiming, seeking his opinion. Yiming helplessly shrugged, "Since you said so, let's go then." "Yay, long live Ming Ji." Zhao Fanlong jumped up happily. He had said that his Ming Ji would always take good care of himself no matter what. The 3 of them arrived at a noodle shop in the amusement park. Since it was Saturday, there were many people in the amusement park, and the shop was crowded with almost no available seats. As they entered the noodle shop, many people's eyes immediately gathered on Yiming. This was not because of anything else, but mainly because Yiming was too good-looking. His height of 1.73 meters, coupled with his slender and upright figure, along with his exquisite features, made him the type that all girls dream of. Yiming was used to this kind of situation and didn't find it strange at all. After all, his current appearance was indeed attractive. The 3 of them sat down at a window seat. At that moment, a waitress walked over. When she saw Yiming for the first time, she was also slightly stunned. After all, Yiming's appearance was too exquisite. "You can scan the QR code on the table to order." The waitress smiled and pointed to the ordering code on the table. "Okay, I got it," Zhao Shuer replied lightly, taking out her phone to scan the ordering code on the table. She glanced at Yiming and said, "Xiaoming, what do you want to eat? You can order." She handed the phone to Yiming. Yiming looked at the menu on the phone, frowned slightly, and found that the prices of these foods were quite expensive. "Ming Ji, why don't you order?" Zhao Fanlong, seeing Yiming's hesitation, asked curiously. He handed the phone back to Zhao Shuer. He wanted to order for himself, as he wanted to keep his distance from her and not spend other people's money unnecessarily. Zhao Shuer took the phone and found that there was no order on it either. She looked at him, somewhat puzzled, and asked, "Xiaoming, don't you want to eat?" "I'll order for myself," Yiming said lightly, refusing in a tactful manner. "Ah, why not, Ming Ji?" Zhao Fanlong, upon hearing this, asked somewhat puzzled. Zhao Shuer understood Yiming's meaning, but she still pretended to be ignorant and said, "Oh, Xiaoming, why are you being so polite?" Yiming was about to speak, but Zhao Shuer interrupted him, "You're not allowed not to order, otherwise I'll be angry." She pretended to threaten him, knowing that he was not that heartless. "Okay then," Yiming reluctantly agreed, as a compromise. "Ming Ji, what do you like to eat?" Zhao Fanlong quickly asked. "I'll have beef noodles, with flat rice noodles as a note," Yiming replied lightly. "Then I'll have the same as Ming Ji," Zhao Fanlong said excitedly to Zhao Shuer. Yiming looked at the 2 siblings and smiled slightly. It seemed that their relationship was really good. The 3 of them chatting here had become the scenery of this shop. Just as they were chatting enthusiastically, 3 more girls suddenly appeared beside them. They looked like troublemakers and, upon seeing Yiming and Zhao Fanlong, they immediately whistled. "Wow, didn't expect to be so lucky today, to meet such handsome men here, really pleasing to the eye." The one speaking was a leading woman. The 3 of them were not tall, just a little taller than Yiming. The leading woman had been paying attention to them since they entered. She had never seen such a beautiful man before. He was simply a demon. She couldn't wait to grab him and ravage him. This kind of man was simply the best of the best. The 3 of them, who had been chatting, stopped talking instantly upon seeing these ruffians. Zhao Shuer stood up and blocked the 2 in front of her, looking alert. "What do you want?" Yiming was a bit speechless. Honestly, this kind of scene was very common. Every time he came out, someone would come up to chat, all kinds of people, and some even threatened to support him. "Hey, don't be so cautious. I just want to make friends with you all," said the leading woman, sitting down next to Yiming and introducing herself as Zhang Qian, with her 2 followers. Zhang Qian was not ugly, but rather had a tough and rebellious look, like a delinquent big sister. She moved quickly, and before Zhao Shuer noticed, she had already sat next to him and tried to put her arm around his shoulder, but Yiming dodged. Seeing this, Zhao Shuer got angry and was about to kick her, but she easily dodged and asked, "What do you want?" Her two followers also reacted and surrounded Zhao Shuer, seemingly ready to fight. The surrounding crowd was drawn to the commotion, and many men were whispering insults about Yiming. Zhao Shuer was furious and threatened the person who had been gossiping. Meanwhile, Yiming paid no attention to the others, as he was used to such comments. Zhang Qian, hearing the unpleasant remarks, also got angry and shouted, silencing the crowd. Yiming was surprised by her support. Zhang Qian then sat next to Yiming and asked for his name. Yiming glanced at her and told her his name, Yiming. She repeated his name and then said, "Wow, Yiming, what a beautiful name." Yiming remained silent, not wanting to engage with her. Zhang Qian continued, "Yiming, you are really handsome. I've decided, I will marry you in the future." Before Yiming could respond, Zhao Fanlong interjected, "Ming Ji will not marry you, so give up." Zhao Shuer agreed, "Yeah, Zhang Qian, stop aiming too high." Zhang Qian retorted, "Am I aiming too high? Aren't you also aiming too high? And you're just a brown toad." This left Zhao Shuer speechless. Yiming, unable to bear the argument, sighed and said, "Can you stop arguing?" He was fed up with the stares from the restaurant crowd and the behavior of these delinquents. "This is a public place, not your backyard. People come and go here. What are you doing?" he said, feeling annoyed. Sorry. Zhang Qian repeatedly apologized, then smirked and said, "Hey, let's be friends." "No, I don't like making friends with strangers," Yiming politely declined. He didn't want too much contact with this woman, as he could tell she wasn't a good person at first sight. Hearing this, Zhang Qian wasn't angry, but persistently said, "Come on, let's chat and get to know each other." She even looked him up and down. Seeing him up close, she found that this man was truly beautiful, with a hint of restrained charm. Her heart raced, and she wished she could just throw herself at him. At this point, Zhao Fanlong trembled and intervened. "Didn't you hear Minggu say not to?" he stammered. Hearing Zhao Fanlong's words, Zhang Qian coldly glanced at him. Although he was decent looking, he paled in comparison to Yiming. Zhao Fanlong, feeling scared, lowered his head. He wasn't good at interacting with girls, let alone those from the underworld. Zhao Shuer stood in front of him, looking unfriendly. "Didn't you hear Xiao Ming say he doesn't like talking to strangers?" "It's none of your business," Zhang Qian retorted without hesitation. Then she suddenly realized something. "Oh, so you like him?" With that, she looked as if she had just had an epiphany. Zhao Shuer was stunned and then indignant. "Zhang Qian, you." Before she could finish, she threw a punch, but Zhang Qian was skilled in street fights and quickly grabbed her wrist. Just as Zhang Qian was about to make another move, there was a loud bang, and everyone turned to look at Yiming. He slapped the table and said impatiently, "Have you two caused enough trouble?" With that, he stood up, took Zhao Fanlong, and walked out. Their commotion had naturally attracted the attention of the diners, who seemed to be enjoying the spectacle. But before they could take a few steps, Zhang Qian stopped them. "Hey, don't rush, I'm serious, let's be friends." Yiming frowned. "Don't you think your behavior is not very appropriate?" Zhang Qian didn't care at all and said with a smile, "Of course I know, but it's not bad to be friends with you." Yiming was speechless. He had seen oily women before, but never such a shameless street thug. He took a deep breath and forced a faint smile. "Fine, let's be friends. Can I go now?" Zhang Qian nodded dazedly. Yiming's smile was like a breath of fresh air, instantly lifting her from hell to heaven. She nodded blankly. "Okay." Then she let Yiming go. Yiming breathed a sigh of relief. After they left, Zhang Qian was still thinking about his warm smile. Zhao Xian and Zhao Rong, her two followers, saw their boss lost in thought. Zhao Xian nudged her. "Xianjia, what are you thinking about?" Zhao Xian nudged Zhao Rong, who also joined in. "Xianjia, are you in love?" It was then that Zhang Qian suddenly realized. When she turned around to look for him, he was already gone. "Where is he?" she asked excitedly. "He's gone," Zhao Rong replied. Zhang Qian felt a little disappointed. His smile was all she could think about, and it made her heart race. Could it be? Is it love at first sight? She murmured, then a smile appeared on her face. Yiming pulled Zhao Fanlong out of the restaurant, and he looked at him in confusion. After a while, he slowly said, "Minggu, how did you become friends with this kind of girl?" Hearing this, Yiming's steps faltered, and after a moment of silence, he said, looking at her like this, "If I didn't agree to her first, what else could I do?" Zhao Shuer also caught up, and after hearing what he said, she said angrily, "Xiao Ming, don't mind her, this kind of woman. Clearly not a good person." "Yes, Minggu, I also think so," Zhao Fanlong echoed from the side. "Alright, we won't see her anyway, in the future." Yiming didn't want to continue this topic, because he felt that continuing to be entangled was useless. "Xiao Ming, let's go eat something first, it's all because of that idiot just now." Zhao Shuer felt uncomfortable at the thought of her punchable face. Yiming also felt a little hungry, and he thought for a moment, then let's go eat frog. But then he thought for a moment and changed his mind. Forget it, let's not eat frog. The country has been discharging nuclear wastewater recently, this barbaric country. He couldn't continue, feeling too angry, disregarding the opposition of other neighboring countries. They were determined to discharge nuclear wastewater. If a war broke out one day, an atomic bomb would wipe out their tiny country. Then what should we eat? Zhao Fanlong asked. Alright, let's go eat pork ribs rice. Yiming thought for a moment, still not sure what to eat, but he felt that it was quite delicious, so he suggested. Okay, we'll listen to Xiaoming. Zhao Shuer came to his side, blushing a little. Great! Let's go, we're starving. Zhao Fanlong said excitedly, then he quickly led the two of them away. In the office of the Nangong group, Nangong Yun watched a video on her phone, her face extremely gloomy. After a while, she took a deep breath and looked at Zhang Qian in the video with a cold gaze. Aching! She shouted outside the door, and Lu Qingqing, dressed in formal attire, came to her side respectfully. Nangong, what are your orders? Nangong Yun threw her phone on the table, and the video of several people going to eat pork ribs rice was still playing. You investigate the backgrounds of these people and find out about that Zhang Qian for me, she said in a cold tone, as cold as ice for thousands of years. Yes, Lu Qingqing responded and began to investigate their information. This was not difficult, after all, with the background of the Nangong family, they almost ruled the roost in this magic city. In just a few minutes, she had dug up their background information. Miss, their information is all here. Lu Qingqing handed her a stack of documents. Nangong Yun took it and carefully read through it. After a while, she put down the documents and said coldly, you have someone secretly follow the Zhao siblings from the Zhao family. Then she glanced at the information of Zhang Qian and others, her eyes becoming even darker. You handle this woman, I hope you do it cleanly. Yes. On the other side, the three of them sat in the restaurant. Yiming looked at the pork rib steamed rice in front of him, picked up his chopsticks, picked up a piece of meat and put it in his mouth. It melted in his mouth, sweet and soft, and tasted extremely good. This meal went smoothly, and they didn't encounter any women like the one just now. While eating, Zhao Shuer's eyes kept sneaking glances at Yiming. She found that this man in front of her was always so dazzling, especially when he was eating, elegant, calm, and composed. Even his occasional wiping of the corners of his mouth was charming. What's wrong? Sensing her gaze, Yiming looked up and met her eyes. Zhao Shuer quickly shook her head. Nothing. Nothing. She lowered her head, her face flushed, feeling suddenly shy. Zhao Fanlong said on the side, Ming Ji, you're about 20, right? Don't you plan to find a girlfriend? As soon as he said this, Zhao Shuer immediately stopped what she was doing and listened to their conversation. No rush, Yiming said lightly. So, what type do you like? Tell me, Zhao Fanlong asked curiously. Why do you ask? Yiming looked at him in surprise. He didn't even have a girlfriend yet, so he didn't want to meddle in others' affairs. Hey, I'm just concerned about you. Zhao Fanlong awkwardly smiled, scratched his head, and then said somewhat stubbornly, come on, just tell me. For the sake of his sister's lifelong happiness, Zhao Fanlong was really putting in a lot of effort. Since the beginning of school, he had been crazy about helping the two of them get together, but every time, it ended in failure. Well, Yiming thought for a moment. He realized that he hadn't really considered this question before. After thinking for a while, he said to Zhao Fanlong, actually, my requirements aren't that high. Good temper is enough, and also, being family-oriented and ambitious. Then he thought for a moment, oh, and I don't like people with strong personalities, because he felt that strong-willed people always impose their own ideas on their partners, so he hated being controlled by others. Listening to what Yiming said, Zhao Fanlong asked in a daze, is that all? What else do you expect? Yiming picked up a piece of ribs and mumbled, ambition is enough. The house and car are not important. We can work hard together. Yiming said indifferently. Oh my god. Ming Ji, there aren't many guys like you who are handsome and have a good moral compass, Zhao Fanlong said in surprise. He really thought that Yiming's requirements were very low, as he himself required at least a house. Zhao Shuer looked at Yiming and found that every part of him was attracting her. He was like a mountain, making it impossible for her to look away. He had a special aura that was irresistible. Seeing her sister's infatuated look, Zhao Fanlong pretended to cough, which immediately brought her back to reality. She looked at Zhao Fanlong and gave him a thumbs up, indicating her approval. Time passed quickly, and before they knew it, it was already evening. The three of them sat on a bench, gazing at the distant starry sky, feeling a bit sentimental. Their thoughts drifted far away, each with their own concerns. After a while, Zhao Fanlong broke the silence. By the way, Ming Ji, what are you going to do after graduation? Yiming's thoughts were interrupted, and he glanced at Zhao Fanlong. What else can I do? Just stay at home and play games. Now, besides playing games at home, he also went to Nan Gongyun's house, which could be considered as work. Then you've become a homebody. Zhao Fanlong couldn't help but comment. Yi Ming glared at him, you little brat, do you want a beating? Seeing Yi Ming's fierce look, Zhao Fanlong's eyes dodged, muttering softly, I was already a homebody. You haven't been beaten for too long, are you feeling uncomfortable? Yi Ming pretended to be fierce and raised his fist, and Zhao Fanlong quickly put his hands up in defense. Seeing Yi Ming's appearance, Zhao Shuer burst into laughter, then she said to Zhao Fanlong, alright, stop messing around. Go buy a bottle of drink for your sister, I'm a little thirsty. Hearing this, Zhao Fanlong looked at her in confusion, and then he realized that Zhao Shuer was signaling to him with her eyes. He immediately understood and nodded, okay, I'll go buy water for you. Originally, Yi Ming wanted to go with him, as he was a bit worried leaving him alone, but he was refused by Zhao Fanlong. Once Zhao Fanlong left, there were only him and Zhao Shuer left. Yi Ming felt a bit awkward and hoped that Zhao Fanlong would come back soon. Zhao Shuer stole a glance at Yi Ming, her face slightly flushed. Then she took a deep breath, turned around, and looked at him with determination. Xiao Ming, her voice was as soft as water, shy like an apple. She gathered her courage and said, Xiao Ming, can we talk? Hearing this, Yi Ming sighed in his heart, what has to happen will happen. I can only be tactful. With that in mind, he smiled at her, sure, Shuer, what do you want to talk about? Zhao Shuer looked at Yi Ming's charming face, her cheeks slightly flushed. Her hands unconsciously tightened. Xiao Ming, do you remember the first time we met? Yes, of course I do. I remember you had just finished playing basketball and were all sweaty. When you came to the cafeteria, you cut in line in front of me. Thinking back to their university days, a faint smile appeared on Yi Ming's face. Yes, you took my lunchbox and helped me get food. That scene has been etched in my mind. Zhao Shuer looked at Yi Ming, her tone filled with emotion and a hint of relief. Can I ask why you helped me get food back then? Zhao Shuer's eyes were intense as she nervously stared at Yi Ming. This was the question she had always wanted to ask, and she wanted to know the answer. Hearing this, Yi Ming recalled the scene and couldn't help but laugh. At that time, you cut in line in front of me, and the lady serving food didn't move. Her expression made me uncomfortable, so I took your lunchbox and helped you get food. He still remembered the expression on the lady's face. Is that all? Zhao Shuer felt a bit disappointed at his answer, but she quickly accepted it. What's wrong, Shuer? Yi Ming looked at her with a puzzled expression, seeing her somewhat disappointed look. Xiao Ming. She suddenly raised her head, gazing at him intensely, her cheeks turning red. It seemed like she had gathered immense courage. Xiao Ming, I like you. Can you be my boyfriend? As she spoke, she stood up, knelt down on one knee, and took out a delicate little box from her pocket. Then she opened it to reveal a diamond ring inside. Xiao Ming, I like you. Since the first time I saw you, I have been deeply attracted to you. You seem to have drawn me in like a magnet. Today is the 23rd time I've confessed to you. I hope you can accept it. Shuer, please get up first. Seeing Zhao Shuer kneeling on the ground, he felt flustered and wanted to help her up, but she remained motionless. Her gaze was firm as she looked at Yi Ming. Xiao Ming, I really like you. I don't know when it started, but when I realized it, I found your figure everywhere in my mind. Do you know? Every time I see you studying in the library, or doing something, or even eating snacks with a smile, I see it all. You are so dazzling, like the morning star in the sky, illuminating my entire universe. So, Xiao Ming, can you give me a chance? Shuer, what are you doing? Please get up first. Yi Ming's face turned red with anxiety. There was already a crowd of people around them, cheering and urging him to accept her. Some boys even shouted, accept her, accept her. Seeing these people, Yi Ming wished he could bury himself in a hole. Not saying anything, Zhao Shuer continued to plead, Xiao Ming, are you unwilling to accept me? Shuer, it's not that. Please get up first. No, unless you promise to be my boyfriend. Zhao Shuer grabbed his sleeve and didn't let go. She was afraid of what would happen if Yi Ming refused her. As more and more people gathered around, Yi Ming felt a headache. Shuer, if you keep doing this, I will get angry, he said with a stern look. Zhao Shuer looked at Yi Ming's serious expression, bit her lip, and finally chose to let go of his sleeve and lowered her head. Yi Ming looked at the stubborn and shy girl and felt a surge of inexplicable emotions. Shuer, let's sit down and talk slowly, okay? Zhao Shuer was unwilling, biting her lip and refusing to look up. Yi Ming sighed and said helplessly, Shuer, please stand up first. Let's talk about this later. As Zhao Shuer was about to say something, Yi Ming interrupted her and whispered in her ear, Shuer, I'm sorry. You are a good person and you will definitely meet someone better. I'm not worth your efforts. There are too many people here now. I will pretend to put away the ring later, and then we can leave here first, okay? Zhao Shuai didn't say anything. She looked down at the ground, her bright eyes filled with tears. More and more tears fell, wetting a small area of the ground. Seeing this, Yiming panicked and said, Shuai, please don't cry. I was wrong, can we leave together? Please don't cry. But Zhao Shuai couldn't stop crying, and it only got worse. Yiming felt the urge to bang his head against the wall. Shuai, please stop crying, okay? I don't know what to do when you cry. Xiaoming, I love you, I really love you, Zhao Shuai said as she hugged Yiming and cried loudly. Yiming let Zhao Shuai cry in his arms, feeling helpless. The onlookers were discussing and even recording videos with their phones. The surrounding voices gave Yiming a headache. He tried to push her away, but she held on even tighter. Shuai, please stop, this is not appropriate, he tried to persuade her. He knew that decisive action was necessary, but this person happened to be his friend's sister. He couldn't be too harsh, but not being firm would only lead to more persistence. He hated this. Even though their relationship was good, he had no feelings for her. He had rejected her several times, but she always cried and came back. As Zhao Shuai continued to cry, Yiming felt embarrassed by her height and her embrace. At this time, Zhao Fanlong couldn't bear it anymore. He had actually come back from the beginning, but had been hiding behind the crowd. He had thought that his sister would give up after her confession failed, but what was she doing? A tall woman of 1.8 meters, actually crying loudly? And he could see the expression on Yiming's face. He knew he was in a difficult position, and a large part of it was because of their relationship. Zhao Fanlong walked up and said, Sis, have you caused enough trouble? Let go already. Hearing Zhao Fanlong's words, she didn't let go of Yiming. Zhao Fanlong went up and pulled her away. Sis, acting like this will only make Minggij dislike you even more. Hearing this, Zhao Shuai sobbed and asked, but I just can't control myself. Sigh. Yiming looked at the pitiful Zhao Shuai and sighed, then he took her hand and said softly, Shuai, stop crying, let's go back first. Yes, sis, look at yourself, you're already grown up, and still crying, isn't it embarrassing? Zhao Fanlong also said unkindly on the side. Zhao Shuai lightly responded, then sniffed and wiped away the tears from the corners of her eyes, and reluctantly showed a smile to Yiming. Let's go, let's leave here first. After the three of them left, the crowd slowly dispersed, but what they didn't know was that in the crowd, a cold-eyed and aloof woman was watching Yiming's figure. Yiming and his group left the Tomato amusement park, and no one spoke. They walked to a less crowded path, and Yiming turned to look at Zhao Shuai. Shuai, sis. Zhao Shuai lowered her head and weakly responded. Seeing her like this, Yiming felt a bit sorry, but he took a deep breath, then looked at her with determination. Shuai, I've made it clear before, I really don't like you. You're a good girl, but we really aren't suitable. You will really need someone better. No, I don't want to. Besides you, I won't marry anyone else. Zhao Shuai's emotions became a bit agitated, and she started crying again. Yiming felt a bit annoyed. Shuai, sis, I'm begging you. Can you not do this, please? I just like you. Enough. Yiming suddenly shouted, how many times do I have to say it? I don't like you. Yiming's sudden roar startled Zhao Shuai. She stared at Yiming with misty eyes, unable to believe what she had just heard. Minggij. Zhao Fanlong looked at the furious Yiming, not knowing what to do. Zhao Fanlong had known Yiming for 5 or 6 years, and although Yiming's usual temperament was very gentle, he was also very stubborn. Once he made up his mind, not even 9 oxen could pull him back. Alright, I'm a bit tired, I'll go back first. Yiming didn't look at her anymore, and just turned and left. Zhao Shuai stood in place, staring blankly at Yiming's departing figure, as if she had forgotten to cry, her mouth open, unable to say a word for a long time, as if she had lost her soul. Zhao Fanlong looked at Yiming's departing figure, then looked at his sister, sighed, and said helplessly, Sis, are you still looking? He's already gone far. Zhao Shuai hesitated for a long time, and finally managed to say, he's angry. What should I do? Minggij. He's not actually angry. As Yiming's best friend, Zhao Fanlong naturally knew that he was pretending, and just now, he even gave him a meaningful look, the meaning of which was self-evident. Then why did he leave? He's afraid of hurting your self-esteem. After all, he doesn't like you. No matter what he does, it's all hurting you. Zhao Fanlong patiently explained. Hearing this, Zhao Shuai was somewhat delighted, and she hurriedly ran to him. Ilon, is everything you just said true? Zhao Fanlong rubbed his temples and said with a serious tone, I know you like Minggu, but you also know that he only sees you as a friend. Your confession just now made Minggu uncomfortable in front of others, and his anger was to put an end to your thoughts. Zhao Shuai remained silent, bowing her head and lost in thought. Zhao Fanlong looked at her and hoped that his sister would give up on Minggu. After a while, Zhao Shuai raised her head, her eyes dark as she watched Yiming leave. She wiped away her tears and said, I understand. Zhao Fanglong, seeing her like this, nodded with some relief, thinking that his sister had given up. "Alright, let's go back," he said. Zhao Shuer replied coldly. Zhao Fanglong found her behavior strange, but couldn't quite put his finger on it. Yiming arrived at the station and suddenly felt his phone vibrate. He took it out and saw a message from Zhao Fanglong. He read it and felt a sense of guilt, but he was clear that he couldn't agree to be with Zhao Shuer. He composed a message and sent it, then put his phone in his pocket and looked at the starry sky. The moon was full tonight, and the night seemed particularly quiet and beautiful. As he was lost in thought, a luxury car slowly pulled up in front of him. The sight of the car interrupted his thoughts, and he was surprised to see Nan Gongyun inside. She didn't say a word, and her cold voice commanded, "Get in." As the car drove off, Yiming couldn't help but feel curious. Nan Gongyun was clearly agitated, and her usual silence was unusual. She was in turmoil, unable to understand why Yiming had deceived her. She wanted to give him genuine affection, but he had hurt her deeply. She felt betrayed and was filled with pain. Yiming looked at her delicate face, puzzled by her behavior. He felt concerned for the person who had angered her, knowing that they would have a hard time in the future. The two of them remained silent as they arrived at Nan Gong's villa. As soon as they reached the gate, Nan Gongyun got out of the car and pulled Yiming towards the villa. "Hey, what are you doing?" Yiming exclaimed, feeling the pain in his hand. Nan Gongyun didn't say anything, feeling conflicted and not wanting to become like her mother. But thinking about Yiming's actions, she wanted to keep him by her side forever. "This man is mine, and only mine," she thought. Thinking of this, her grip tightened, and Yiming's hand was pinched painfully. He tried to pull his hand away, but it was no use. On the contrary, as he struggled, her grip grew stronger. "Xian Yun, let go, you're hurting me," Yiming winced in pain. In this world, there was a significant difference in size between men and women, so she easily held Yiming's hand. Nan Gongyun's face darkened as she dragged Yiming into the room and shut the door. She threw him onto the bed with great force, her strength much greater than that of an average woman. Yiming's back hit the wall, causing him to groan in pain. Rubbing his back, he glared at her. "Nan Gongyun, are you starting to act up again? If someone has upset you, go find them. Why come to me?" he said angrily, realizing that this bossy attitude was truly overbearing. Seeing his angry expression, Nan Gongyun became even more infuriated. "Why did you deceive me?" she demanded, staring at him intently. Yiming was puzzled. "Deceive you? When did I deceive you? Is there a misunderstanding?" he asked tentatively. He couldn't understand. "Misunderstanding? I saw you hugging another girl outside. Explain that to me." Nan Gongyun's voice echoed coldly in the room, causing the atmosphere to plummet. Hearing this, Yiming was at a loss. "Please, that was just for show. It was just a coincidence that you found out," he said, looking at Nan Gongyun's dark face. He hurriedly explained, "You misunderstood. She confessed to me, and I didn't want to embarrass her in front of everyone, so I pretended to hug her." Nan Gongyun's expression softened slightly at his words, but she was still cold. "From now on, you stay at home and don't go anywhere," she ordered. Yiming frowned in displeasure. "Why? We only have a contractual relationship. You can't restrict my freedom," he protested. His tone of voice angered Nan Gongyun. "Do you want to test my patience?" she asked coldly. "Are you crazy?" Yiming retorted angrily. "Say that again," she demanded. Before Yiming could speak, a strong force struck his throat, and he felt a sharp pain on his left cheek. He was shocked to see that Nan Gongyun had actually hit him.